What's the scariest thing that's happened while you were home alone? A car legally parked under my bedroom window in a dark alley when I was living in the bad part of Montreal. The cops told me they'd get it towed as it offered a perfect way to easily climb through my window. They didn't act fast enough, and that same night I heard a sound while in the living room. I glanced down the hall to my bedroom and could clearly see a guy crawling through the window. I grabbed a frying pan from the counter and hit him straight in the face with it. He fell back onto the car roof and ran away. The police didn't find him. And I moved. This was something that startled me more than terrified me. I went into my garage to get something when suddenly I hear this commotion in the corner, next to my tools. I went over to investigate and shuffle the tools a bit, and then almost shit myself. A bunch of bunnies started from underneath the tools and ran in different directions all over the garage. I almost had a heart attack. I opened the garage's door and they all managed to scatter and find their way outside. This obviously can't match up to what most people have posted here, but it really spooked me at the time.
What is the dumbest thing you have tricked someone into believing? About a year ago, I was taking off the remnants of a peel-off mask I put a little bit on my shoulders. My boyfriend walked in and asked me what I was doing, and for some reason I joked and said, "Oh, I'm shedding my skin since I just finished my period." He was really confused, but believed me immediately and started asking a ton of questions. I decided it would be funny to stick with the joke and answer all the questions. Here's how it went. "So why do you have to do that?" "Well, you know how girls shed the lining of their womanhood during their periods? It's kind of the same thing, but since skin doesn't contract, we have to peel it off." "Does it hurt?" "Only a little bit, but it's such a relief when it's off." "Do all girls have this?" "Yes, but we're all kind of ashamed of it because a lot of guys shame us for it, so don't ask girls around you about it." My poor gullible baby boy. Well, once, he mentioned it around one of my best girlfriends. I gave her a look from across the room, and she went with it. And then he mentioned it in front of his sister. I gave her a look, she went with it, and then told their mom to go along with it later if he ever asked. This spread around quickly. His aunt, my mother, my sisters, my female cousins, his grandmother, all of my female friends, all of his sister's female friends, everyone. While all of this happened, his male friends found out about it. One of them asked their moms, and she laughed at him and didn't say anything, so he believes it. The others still believe it without question. This had spread like a wildfire that I could not control. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the joke, but earlier today, I was sitting at the dinner table with him and his family just chatting, and I was scratching my shoulder because I got a really bad sunburn and it was starting to peel. He asked me if my sunburn was bothering me and if I wanted some aloe vera, so I said yes. He said to me in front of the entire table, "It must suck that your sunburn is peeling and you have to peel this time of the month again." It took everything in me to not burst out laughing, but it took absolutely nothing for his mother to snort water out of her nose and proceed to laugh at the dinner table. His sister buried her face in her hands and laughed so hard that her face turned bright red and she snorted over and over again. Much to my surprise, I did not laugh, but I felt myself convulse and my face got so hot. He was really confused, but his dad was even more confused. He asked him what he was talking about, and my poor boyfriend, who was so confused as to why his sister and mom were laughing, said, "Well, you know, when girls have that time, they have to peel, right?" And his dad just looked at all three of us dumbfounded and said, "What the hell have you been telling this boy?" And we all lost it. I started laughing so hard that I thought I was going to throw up. I was crying, I was in pain, I probably burst a couple blood vessels from laughing so hard. I finally fessed up because I couldn't explain my maniacal laughter anymore. He looked at me like I just shot his dog. I told him I was so sorry and explained the origin of this running joke. He sat back down at the table absolutely dumbfounded. After dinner we went back to his room and he asked me, "Everyone has been lying to me about this and you started it." I felt so bad, and I was apologizing profusely. He was silent for about a minute before he started laughing harder than I have ever heard him laugh before. He had tears rolling down his cheeks, his face was bright red, and he kept grabbing his stomach and heaving from how hard he was laughing. He told me between heaves that he couldn't believe that I had gotten every single woman in his life to convince him that this complete BS was real, and that he wouldn't believe periods were real at this point if he hadn't witnessed me curled up in the bathroom sobbing from cramps.
My wife went missing 15 years ago and today I received an anonymous call. I don't like to talk about what happened 15 years ago. I don't even like to think about the fact that on January 7, 2008, Sarah Collins, beloved member of the community, left home to run an errand and was then never seen again. It was a huge case back then. Everyone seemed to want to know what happened to her, but no one was more desperate for answers than I was. Sarah and I had been married for 5 years. I knew as soon as I met her that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She had one of those smiles that just lit up a room. That's why it was so hard to believe that such a beautiful, successful woman had seemingly disappeared. They hadn't even recovered her body. 15 years later and they still didn't have a shred of evidence. Not a tire track, or even a fingerprint. Nothing. The police put out an appeal, but no one came forward. Somehow, not a single person had seen her. It was like she had just vanished without a trace. I think about Sarah a lot. I could never quite bring myself to take down the photos of her from around the house. Sarah's bright face still smiles down at me from every room. There's one photo of her, from our wedding day, that I really love. Looking at it is like looking straight at her. It captured her perfectly. 2 days ago, I found myself staring at it, really getting lost in the details. Her eyes, the way the corners of her mouth were lifting into a smile, the small dimple on her left cheek. I was looking at it so intently that I almost didn't notice the phone ringing. It was the landline phone, which was odd, as no one ever called me on the landline anymore. It was all mobiles nowadays. When I looked at the caller ID, it was an unknown number. I shrugged, and picked it up anyway. It was probably just the bank, calling to confirm something. The call took a moment to connect, but when it did, I heard a strange rustling sound on the other end of the line. Hello? I wasn't in the mood for any prank callers. Is anyone there? Hello? Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The voice on the other end of the line was a woman's voice, shaking and breathless. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? When I heard her name, it was like my heart had stopped beating for a moment. Sarah. My Sarah. But that was impossible. Sarah had gone missing 15 years ago. Whoever this was, it was not my wife. I don't know who you are, but you're not Sarah, I hissed into the phone, coldly. Stop calling this number. I had dealt with a lot of these calls, especially when Sarah first went missing. Con artists, fraudsters, anyone who wanted to manipulate a grieving husband. I knew none of them were my wife. No, Daniel, wait, you have to listen to me. It's me. Sarah. You have to believe me. She was sounding shrill and desperate now, even a little hysterical. The lengths that people go to in order to sell a lie is astonishing. Why are you doing this? I asked, angrily. It's been 15 years since my wife disappeared. What do you want from me? For a moment, the woman on the other end of the line didn't respond. I was beginning to think that the call had disconnected, when she finally spoke. Daniel, please. It's me. It's your wife, Sarah, the woman begged. I'm telling the truth. It's me, she continued to plead, but I'd had enough. I wasn't going to listen to this liar anymore. Don't call this number again, I firmly told her, hanging up. I thought that would do it. She wouldn't be likely to call me again. I assumed it was all over. The next day, I had asked a friend to help me repair my plumbing system. He was a good friend, I'd known him since college. He had been there for me when Sarah disappeared, getting me through it. We were both taking a break, catching up on the important events in each other's lives, when my landline phone began to ring again. Sorry, I have to take this. It might be important, I said, getting up from my seat and making my way to the phone. I noticed that the call was coming from an unknown number, just as it had the day before. I didn't make a connection right away. After all, it could have just been the bank this time around. I picked up the phone, and I heard the same rustling sound. It was unsettling, in a strange way. I almost felt like I had heard it before. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Hello? I was already beginning to get a good idea of what this call was, and I wasn't happy about it. I told you not to call this number. Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The very same words that she had said the day before. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? It was undoubtedly the same woman. I don't have the time for this, I hissed into the phone. I know you're not Sarah. Stop calling me. I hung up the call and walked back to my friend, who looked confused. Who was that? He asked me. I heard you saying Sarah's name. Is everything okay? It was some prank caller, trying to pretend to be Sarah, I told him, rolling my eyes. I thought that I had left it all behind. I even changed my phone number. I don't know how this woman got hold of my new one. Pretending to be Sarah? My friend echoed. That's really strange. Did you tell anyone about it, like the police? No. I shake my head. There's no need. It's just someone trying to cause a bit of drama. They probably want money, or something like that. I made it clear that was the end of the conversation. I didn't want to continue talking about it, bringing up harmful reminders of the past. I woke up the next day, not expecting to get any more calls from the unknown number. I made it very clear that I wouldn't be participating in her charade. However, I was quickly proven wrong. As soon as I started to walk downstairs for a glass of water, the phone rang again. I thought about letting it ring, but I had a better idea. I was going to issue a much stronger warning to the caller, even threatened to get the police involved if the calls wouldn't stop. That would scare her, I was certain of it. I picked up the phone, hearing the very same eerie rustling. I couldn't explain it, but it made a shiver run up my spine. Finally, the call connected. It was just the same as the other times, the same pathetic monologue. Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. Maybe it was even a recorded message. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? If you don't stop calling this number, I'll have no choice but to involve the police, I told the caller. This is harassment. If you want money, try conning someone else. Before I could even give the woman on the other line a chance to answer, I hung up the call. Hopefully this would show her that she wouldn't be manipulating me. I could see right through her elaborate scam. I was sure that my warning would stop the calls coming in. I was so sure of myself that when I was woken by a loud, persistent ringing sound the next morning, I didn't even think to connect it to the unknown number calls. I first assumed it was my alarm, waking me up, but when I turned to look, I saw that the alarm hadn't gone off yet. That was when I reached the conclusion that it was the landline phone. I rushed down the stairs, wanting to tell the caller that I would be taking police action, wanting to catch out the desperate scammer. Fortunately, I got down there in time, and picked up the phone. Holding it to my ear, I heard that creepy rustling that I had become familiar with. It still made my heart beat faster, just for the few seconds until the call connected. Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The usual message of hysteria came through the phone. I was well used to hearing it by now. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? I gave you a warning. I said that if you called again, I would be taking legal action. I spoke into the phone, loudly so that whoever was on the other side would be sure to hear me. You've gone too far now. I have to do something about this. I waited for the woman to respond. Daniel? No, it's me. I'm not lying to you. I would never lie to you. Daniel, it's me, Sarah. Your wife, it's me. I can't stand the high-pitched whine of her voice. You're not Sarah, I told her, bitterly. I know you're not Sarah. I will be taking action. Goodbye. I hung up the call for the final time and placed the phone back. I know that woman wasn't Sarah. I know for a fact she wasn't. I know it, because, on January 7, 2008, Sarah Collins, beloved member of the community, was killed. And I was the one who killed her. Sarah was an incredibly beautiful woman. I couldn't believe my luck when she first started showing interest in me. I didn't exactly have a lot of experience when talking to women, and I was ecstatic that someone like Sarah had chosen someone like me. I loved her, for every single second of our marriage. I loved her, even when I found out that she was cheating on me. I had accidentally stumbled across a string of romantic messages between Sarah and one of her coworkers. She was planning to leave me for him. My Sarah was planning to leave me for him. I couldn't have that. She was so beautiful, so bright, so full of life. I couldn't lose her. I just couldn't lose her, so I killed her. I didn't have to think about it for long. It was the only way that she would be mine, only mine forever. If she was dead, she would never leave me. She would always be my Sarah. When the police arrived, I made up an elaborate lie that she had gone out to run an errand and never come home. That very same lie ended up on headlines of the national news. I didn't know if I would even get away with it. But a year passed, and then another year, and then another. 15 years passed, and no one ever saw through me. I was about to walk back upstairs, when I heard a small tapping at the window. Click, click. That was the sound of the window opening, and that's when I heard it. Rustling, right here in my own house. Rustling that paralyzed me with fear and sent my mind into a state of panic. Then I heard her. Daniel? Daniel, thank goodness I finally reached you. The voice was coming from inside the house now. Daniel, it's me. It's Sarah. Are you there? What is the best example of the American dream? There was this very poor guy of 16 years whose dad passed away when he was 5. He had a family of 5 sisters, 1 non-working mother and 1 elder non-working brother. He joined Indian Navy to help his family financially, right after completing his schooling. But he wasn't making enough. Therefore, he chose to be a diver in Navy, for which they are paid extra with ration supply and everything. Now for the diving exam, there were a total of 16 cadets, of which only 3 were to be selected. He lost in the swimming category itself to this other guy who was a Bamia. He was to go back home the next day, expelled. That evening in the mess, the Bamia walked up to him and said, "You don't look like you belong to a warrior caste. I defeated you so easily." He didn't comment then, just packed his bags and left the other day. The next selection was after 6 months. In this time, all he did was train himself to become a stone physically. Running over 20 kilometers every morning and evening, diving off random and unsafe cliffs, once was even arrested for jumping in high tide in the Arabian Sea for practicing. 6 months later, he gave the exam and cleared it. Then came the competition, in which he not only stood first, but also set a record for Indian Navy in deep sea diving. He stood first and cleared the exam. 2 months after that, he was the chief instructor of the same Bamia guy who had mocked him and now was junior to him in the Navy. Today he holds international deep sea water clearance of 400 MTS and has topped the deep sea diver medic exam of UK, beating contestants from 162 countries and made India proud. He then moved to America and joined the Navy, where he was able to provide a home for all of his siblings as well as his family. He is my dad. What is something interesting you've overheard while pretending to sleep? So my very conservative family is big on taking family vacations. My parents never liked to spend a lot of money though, so for 1 week during the summer, my sister and I found ourselves in a cheap, 2-bedroom cottage far away from civilization. 1 year, my ultra-conservative parents allowed my sister to bring her boyfriend to the 2-bedroom cottage for a few days. My parents slept in 1 bedroom and of course they demanded that I be a gentleman and let my sister sleep in the 1 remaining bedroom. Whatever, I'm pretty laid back, but the fold-out couch sagged something fierce, so when I centered myself on the bed, the sides were practically encompassing me. My conservative parents, of course, were not about to let my sister's boyfriend sleep in the bedroom with my sister. Oh no, he was fortunate enough to get a tiny, old, rusty cot which my parents set up right next to me by the fold-out couch. We had electricity, and we had running water, but that was about it. There was never that much of anything to do, but I enjoy reading, so I didn't mind family vacations. One night, I was on the fold-out couch reading a particularly good book. It was around 1 a.m. when I finally turned off the lamp and decided to get some sleep. So I turn off the lamp, put my head down on the pillow, and then a few seconds later, I hear the slider door open. Apparently, my sister and her boyfriend were outside drinking by the campfire. They were both giggling as they came into the cottage, and by their failed attempts at whispering, I could tell that they were both at least a little intoxicated. Not my business. I didn't want to make things awkward for them, so I pretended to be asleep. I had my eyes closed and was keeping my breathing even. A few seconds later, I heard them kiss goodnight and they went their separate ways. My sister went to the bedroom, and my sister's boyfriend plopped on the cot right next to where I was pretending to be asleep. So not even a minute later, I'm half drifting off to sleep and I start hearing noises in the direction of the cot. It sounded like fapping, very cautious fapping. I was around 18 years old at this point. I've been around the block. I know how to recognize the telltale sounds of fapping when I hear them. So yeah, my now brother-in-law was on the cot right next to me smacking his meat to images of my sister. So the cot was really freaking small. I'm pretty sure my sister's boyfriend's legs were dangling off the edge of the cot, but in any case the entire cot would shift and squeak every couple of seconds that he was doing the dirty. I didn't want to make things awkward and interrupt the guy, so I made the ultimate bro sacrifice. I kept my breathing even, and let the guy finish. Looking back, it was kind of funny because occasionally he would get carried away and realize that he had made too much noise. He would pause to listen and see if I had woken up, but I kept my breathing sorta heavy and even throughout the ordeal, so he eventually would get confident and keep going. Towards the end, the cot was practically like hopping up and down, and then things finally grew silent. I knew he had finished, and sure enough, a few seconds later, he made the rookie mistake of accidentally letting go of his sweatpants, and I heard the classic flop as they came back to his stomach. So yeah, I had a hard time looking my sister's boyfriend in the eye the next morning. Ladies, what was the best flirting technique someone did to you? Met my husband through a random roommate's boyfriend. I had met him a few times at this point, and he spotted me unloading groceries from my car. He insisted on helping me carry everything in and even just unloading everything onto the counters while asking about my day. It was incredibly easy to imagine dating him all of a sudden because I had a tiny glimpse into what my day-to-day could look like. Joke's on him, though. I now refuse to carry groceries, and on principle, a man I worked with asked me for my phone number. We had already been working together for a few weeks and a mutual attraction was evident. I pointed to the bulletin board behind him. It's on the wall there. I know, but I want you to give it to me. I don't think his intentions could have been more boldly nor charmingly stated. We moved in together 3 weeks later and are still in love 25 years later. When I was 10, I received a love letter from a boy. It contained a flower inside, and at the bottom of the letter he wrote some G codes for Mortal Kombat for me. He knew I was always playing that game on my Sega. I'm British and I came over to the States on a temporary work visa to do one ski season with Vail Resorts. I was bartending at a mountain restaurant and a couple of snowboarders come in and start talking to me. It came up that I was only there for the season. Then one of them says, "I'll marry you so you can stay, but we have to go on a date first." We just celebrated our 13-year anniversary and I'm still in Colorado when my husband and I started dating. He would do this thing when he shifted gears in his shitty little Sentra. He would kind of brush the back of his hand on the outside of my thigh as he shifted. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like fireworks every time it happened. We were riding in the car when I realized I could spend the rest of my life riding shotgun with him.
Story time about the girl who left me unconscious in the girls' bathroom. So a little background information. I was pretty young at the time. I was in 7th grade and I was 11 years old. And there was this girl who we're gonna call Jenna. Jenna hated me for absolutely no fucking reason. She would bully me because I had red hair, and she would text me literally every day at the same time, telling me to off myself, and how I was weird and how nobody liked me. One day she randomly started being nice to me. She sat with me at lunch and her water bottle was empty, and she asked if I needed mine filled up too. Stupidly, I said yes. Well, she ended up putting drugs in my water bottle. After like 20 minutes, I started feeling sick, so I went to the bathroom, and I was kneeling over the toilet when everything went black. Well, when I didn't come back from the bathroom, my teacher got worried, so she sent security looking for me. They were banging on my stall. Obviously, I was fucking unconscious, so I didn't answer. So then they called the fire department, the police, the ambulance were all there.
My parents are forcing me to join a cult. My parents have joined some new age religion and intend to move me to a compound against my will. What can I do to get the hell out of here? So I really don't know how to start this, so I'll get right to it. My mom and stepdad are really into new age science and beliefs. I've never agreed with them on this and didn't know how extreme it was. Recently though, they have become involved in an extremely weird support group. I say that in quotes because I have no clue who they are. When I'm around they never mention any group names or what organization they work for or are a part of. Because of this I have not had much luck finding out stuff, as new age cult gives too many results to look into. This Monday my mom and stepdad sat me and my 4 siblings down. They told us that we will be moving at the end of the month to a more stable location within a spiritual community. According to them they plan to pull all 5 of us. I'm 16, couldn't think of anywhere else to mention this, out of school here and enroll us in their mind awakening school wherever we move. I tried to get anything out of them but they refused to talk to me at all about it. According to them, because I'm still a child in mind, body, and spirit, I need to listen to them, not ask questions. I've actually been freaking out since then and have been trying to get advice but I've been unable to. They cut off the internet, phone and TV Tuesday and they have been keeping a laser focus on me and my siblings since then. I'm currently at a friend's house and this is the only way I've actually got access to the internet. This seems like a cult 100% to me. Last night they had 3 people come and talk to me and my siblings and the stuff they told us was crazy. I was talked to alone by an old man who told me about how my mind is closed and that I will slowly learn to open it as my parents have, and that the leaders will love to meet me and put me in their programs. I need to know what the heck I can do here. My dad has shared custody of me and since Monday I've had no contact with him. He is supposed to have a call with me every night but my mom claims he's been informed and supports this 100%. I tried calling him this morning but he didn't answer. He lives in another state so it's kinda hard to get into contact with him outside of phone and email. I'm at a friend's house because I was able to leave the house for the first time in a week this morning after I told my parents I wanted to go to the park but came here and told my friend everything. Her parents are not home but she's trying to call them and I plan to stay here tonight if I can. My parents have forbid me from using the internet because it's full of lies from them. I'm so lost right now it makes me sick. I do not want to go with them to this obvious compound and I need to know what the heck I can do here. Can I just run away, and if my parents harbor me can they get in trouble? If my mom has been lying about my dad, can he do anything? Thanks. I talked to my mom and told her because I would be moving soon and this might be one of the last times I could see my friend I would like to stay the night, and she said it was okay and that this family was trustworthy not to try and corrupt my view. I got into contact with my dad and he's pissed. He did not agree and was told I didn't want to talk to him. My 15-year-old sister's dad was told the same despite the fact he has primary custody and she only spends the summers with us. My sister's dad is going to call CPS too and I just got done with my call to them but I won't repeat what they said here. I will be spending the night here and when my mom asks me to come back tomorrow my dad has told me not to go back and tell her that he will be flying down here to Florida immediately if I don't check in with him or he hears I went back to her. He says that he is already looking into emergency custody. I want to thank my friend's parents real quick because holy heck have they been great. They both have been great and are working with my dad right now to help me. I also will be going and buying a burner phone tomorrow and withdrawing all my money from the bank. My dad says he will handle getting my stuff from my mom when the time comes. Thanks guys for the advice. Am I the a-hole for gifting my granddaughter a custom-made cookbook instead of something a little pricey? I, 59 female, have 3 kids. My husband died 10 years ago and since then I have been on my own. I live in a small townhouse. I am not poor but I am not too comfortable with my living situation. So, recently, my son Keith told me he wanted to throw a party for my granddaughter, Rita's 18th birthday because she is going to be an adult. He wants the day to be memorable to her. I know my son. He loves his kids very much. I love my grandkids as well. I know he is going to buy her some expensive gifts. I, on the other hand, cannot afford to buy something expensive. But I wanted my gift to be thoughtful and show efforts that I love Rita as well. So, I had an idea. I have been a home cook for more than 30 years. I used to work in a restaurant before and then moved on to having my own catering business in my early years. I loved creating new recipes and altering the old ones to my own. So, I had an idea to make a compilation of some of my signature recipes and make them into a book. I wrote down 20 recipes on my computer and with the help of some grateful people I was able to print them out. I then had another idea to make the recipes into a cookbook. So, I went to a publication house and told them to make a cookbook that looks like an ancient book except it will contain recipes. I did that because 1, Rita has a passion for cooking. She wants to go to culinary school and hopes to open her own restaurant chain. 2, Rita also likes things that are medieval, she is into one of those Lord of the Rings kind of things. So I thought it was a thoughtful gift for my lovely granddaughter. When the day arrived, I packed it up along with her favorite cookies. When it was time to open the presents, she got a lot of stuff and when it was time for mine, I was happy. She opened it and gasped. I explained to her that the book contains all the signature recipes I have made over the years and I want her to have it. She said, thank you and that she appreciates my gift and someday she will try to recreate it. Everyone seems to be happy except for her mother. She pulled me aside and told me I should have made more effort into her gift and not give her some cheap book. I was appalled. I told her Rita likes it and that's all that should matter. She told me Rita only pretended to like it because she doesn't want to be disrespectful and Rita is still a child who doesn't know anything. And also added that it was a little narcissistic of me to make Rita's gift about myself and my cooking rather than it being about her. When did you notice your child had grown up and was no longer a kid? When my son was in the 8th grade, he got suspended and I had to leave work early to go get him. When I got there, I asked the principal what had happened. The principal explained that my son had beaten up 3 other boys and even broken one boy's wrist. I was obviously horrified and asked my son what the fuck he was thinking. He simply told me that the boys had cornered one of his friends and were trying to make her strip for them. Being the chivalrous boy I raised him to be, he put a stop to it. I asked the principal if it was true and he dodged the question. In response to that, I told the school that if they were going to allow sexual harassment, I didn't want my child to attend and took him home. I told my son that I was going to take him out of public school. He replied by telling me that he didn't want to leave the school because if he wasn't there, then who was going to stop it from happening again? This is when I realized my little boy had become a man. He would rather get in trouble to protect a friend than stay out of the spotlight and potentially face long-term consequences. Added, I feel the need to point out that my son also got his ass kicked, and to be frank, beat up was probably the wrong term to use. A bit exaggerated when describing what he did to those 3 boys. I assumed that was implied, but oh well, what can you do? The police were called and the bully's parents didn't press charges. As long as the girl's parents didn't either. The school penalized all 3 boys, and the girl's mother and I are very close friends now. I ruined my ex-best friend's career because she chooses to stay with her offender husband. And I don't regret it. I, 27, female, reported to my ex-best friend that she was married to a registered offender, 28, male. In August 2021 I found out that my best friend's husband was arrested on 10 counts of child P. After a year-long investigation, she tried to hide the arrest from me and even went so far as to beg other people not to tell me, but in a world of Facebook nothing stays hidden for long. I helped my friend get her job at the same school that my daughters attend. My daughters are special needs and she went into the special education department specializing in helping nonverbal children. Ages 9-56. I now regret ever helping her and have since withdrawn my letter of recommendation. When I originally confronted her about the arrest, she assured me she never knew anything about it and she was already talking to a divorce lawyer. I was fine with that at first when I learned from mutual friends. She had fired her divorce attorney and intended to stay with him no matter the outcome of the trial. Her words, his lawyer is hopeful he will only get probation. Either she is so blind in being manipulated or she knew the entire time. In June 2022 he pleaded guilty to all 10 counts. In return for his guilty plea he received 5 years probation and had to become a registered defender. The address he listed is a mile away from my brother's house. I have to pass it to get there. And every time I do, her vehicle is there. The same vehicle I was there when she bought it. So in August I learned she would be working in my children's special needs classroom and that didn't sit well with me. I went to the school director with court documents in hand. His offender registration paperwork. A photo from their wedding proving the same guy from the offender registration is the same guy she is married to, and I had a nice long chat. I simply don't trust her around nonverbal children that she would have to help in the bathroom in case of accidents. Children who couldn't defend themselves and talk to someone. The week school started, she was removed from the elementary department and has to work in the high school side and will not be working with the special needs department going forward. And I just had confirmation from the school board that her contract for next year will not be renewed after 16 years of friendship. I felt guilty that I caused her to lose her career at first. But now I feel so happy that the school board listened to me and took not only my side but the kids' sides, which is who matters in situations like this. The kids. What's something you did on a whim that ended up being one of the best decisions you've ever made? This one was life or death. It was on a snowboard trip. As I was going down a main run at the end of a day, I noticed the tip of a ski pole sticking out of the snow, just out of the corner of my eye. It was beneath a small looking tree, sticking out about 6 inches. I thought I would grab it and toss it in the lost and found at the lodge. It was snowing hard, with giant fluttery flakes, and no wind, however light was fading fast. As I got closer I heard a scratchy and muffled scream. I immediately unstrapped, got my board in front of me and used it to pull myself towards the sound and ski pole, kind of hopping at the same time. When I got right on top of it the sound stopped, so I yanked on the pole, it yanked back. I began digging furiously, kinda like a Saturday morning cartoon character, alternating hands and tossing the snow behind me. Eventually I made it down to a face. It was a gray-haired old man who looked like he'd been crying. His eyes were wild looking but his body had nothing left. I grabbed his jacket and pulled him up a bit. Although he looked like he weighed 120 pounds, I asked him how to take his skis off as I couldn't pull him out without doing so. He couldn't speak, he just turned away and motioned with his hands. I fumbled with him for a bit, but once I got his skis out, we were in business. I managed to get him out, but he was so tired he couldn't move on his own. I more or less dragged him out and away from the tree, then I sat down to take a break. By the time I dug and drug us both out from the tree well, the mountain was empty. I heard a few snowmobiles go by earlier while I was digging, but now nothing. I asked if he was good to ride down or had a phone so we could call someone. He looked at me and shook his head. We were about 3/4 up the mountain. Of all the days, this was the day I left my phone in the car. The only thing I could come up with was for him to get on my back and I would do my best to get us both down. I am an expert level rider but was completely unsure of my ability to ride with someone on my back. I also thought if I left this guy here and went down, he might die before we got back. I ditched my backpack and his skis and we gave it a shot. It's a skill and hard enough to stand up with both feet strapped into your board. There was no way I was doing it with someone on my back. I had to sit him up against the hill where I could just sort of push off and go. Took a couple of tries before I was able to stand and point my board downhill. At first it was easy, until I had to take a turn at speed. My legs were on fire and he wasn't really helping as I had to hold him to me. This was probably the only time I ever wished for ice on the mountain. The powder made it difficult to hold him, maintain control and keep enough speed so I could take big sweeping turns. Also, it was dark. I could still see the faint glow of light from the parking lot and lodge beyond the tips of the trees way down below. Somehow we made it to the bottom and I made sure to keep up enough speed to get us right to the lodge past the flats. When we got pretty close I started yelling for help. Someone heard and a light was pointed at us. As soon as I got within 20 feet of the heated cement area I collapsed. I had nothing left in me. My throat tasted like blood and my arms and legs were made of jelly. The old man fell with me, but managed to roll over to my side. People ran over and were asking us what happened and I pointed at the old man saying he needed help. The old man picked himself up and turned over to hug me. He started bawling hard in my chest and for some reason I did too. I kept patting him on the back and telling him it was going to be okay. I think the whole ordeal got to us. My friends were waiting for me, talking to ski patrol about where they last saw me because they thought I was lost. When they saw me, they all ran up and kept asking me what happened. Someone brought me a soda and I drank it like it was the best thing I had ever tasted. Ski patrol was looking the old man over and I was giving a statement to a police officer. All I wanted to do was go home. Eventually we left and I woke up in my driveway. I never did get his name, but I look for him every time I return to the mountain.
Boys, be honest, what makes a girl instantly unattractive? Looking like an Oompa Loompa with fake tan, also plastic surgery to make their lips puffy. I'd rather throw my lad into a blender. Flirting with every guy. If you're trying to make me jealous or think that you could have any guy at any time, congrats, it works, I'm out. Lying, being flaky, talking negatively about everything and everyone. Those obvious lip fillers looking all swollen like they just ate something allergic. Doesn't matter how hot a woman is, as soon as it goes in her mouth it's a no. Not a guy, but I have heard many guys say that women who talk crap about other women / talk about drama a lot would be an immediate no. No one likes someone who feels the need to put others down. GPS kept taking me back to my randonaut location point. Just a quick one that happened the other day. I've been randonauting to randomly generated locations to walk a bit with my sick dog for a few months. The other day we were on the way to a spot, driving, at dusk, I know. I had set the intention of peace and healing or something. It was dark by the time we arrived and as I was about to turn the last little corner to see the spot, I stopped, because I immediately felt creeped out. It was an extremely dark, woodsy corner that I couldn't really see past. I got this overwhelming feeling of dread, like I was being naively summoned into the trap of turning this corner only for something to go terribly wrong. I wondered if I was just imagining things, but the doom feeling became so overwhelming that I literally U-turned it out of there like a madwoman, my poor dog flinging around the back seat. I entered my home into the GPS and was driving for a bit until I realized I was headed the wrong way. Zoomed the maps out, and saw it was actually now taking me back to the creepy roundabout corner that I never turned. This happened, I kid you not, 2 more times before I finally recognized where I was and just got home with my own sense of direction. This type of thing has never happened before.
My bully tries to unalive me, but I use it to my advantage. She tries unaliving me with an allergic reaction, but I had already planned ahead. In school I was relentlessly bullied. 2 girls in particular had it out for me. I was shy, loved to read, didn't do the popular stuff, so I was the perfect victim. They'd literally torture me by holding me down in the staircase when we were alone and sticking pinboard pins into my arms, legs and feet. When I tried to tell teachers, they said I fell onto them as they were lying on the floor or I did it myself. It didn't help that one of them was the daughter of one of the teachers at the school. Well, I finally got my revenge. I went to try out a new ice cream shop and lo and behold, one of the girls was serving the ice cream. I have multiple allergies including milk and gluten, of which the ice cream shop claimed to be cautious. So I ordered gluten and dairy-free ice cream and set my phone camera up to film the area where the ice cream was prepared because I saw that the girl had recognized me and was certain she'd try something. And she did. I caught her on camera putting a spoonful of milk in the bottom of the bowl and crumbling the gluten-consisting wafers over everything, then camouflaging it with the last scoop of ice cream. She put it down in front of me and said, "I hope you enjoy it." I sweetly smiled at her and asked if she could get the owner of the shop because I wanted to thank her for being so welcoming to guests with allergies. You can guess what happened next. I showed the owner the video and told her that I'd like to press charges, because in my country it is considered a criminal offense called inflicting bodily harm to serve someone an allergen when you know the person is allergic. The bully will never work anywhere where she'll come in contact with food again and she'll have this on her criminal record for years.
My husband admitted to his friends that he didn't find me beautiful. Nothing feels the same anymore. I'm newly married. After our honeymoon, my husband had a group video call with his best friends. After I said hello and chatted for a bit with them, I excused myself to go for a walk. I decided I needed to get my raincoat because it looked like it was about to rain, but my husband and his friends thought I had already gone out. They started interrogating him about our honeymoon, and they were all teasing and laughing until one of his best friends asked him if my looks were still an issue for him. My husband told her that he loved me and that we had a great honeymoon, and that I'm beautiful on the inside, but he said, "You can't have it all." She insisted on wondering whether he felt he'd downgraded from his ex-girlfriend, and he said, "Maybe, but me, makes me happy." Another friend then interjected and said I wasn't bad looking if I lost some weight, and my husband agreed. Nothing feels the same anymore. I always knew I wasn't beautiful, but I thought that he liked how I looked, or at least, didn't mind it so much. I know he values my other qualities and that he loves me and is very kind to me, but I don't feel good with him, and I haven't been happy since that day, 5 weeks ago. I have lost weight during these weeks, and he's paid me a lot of compliments about that, but I don't want him commenting anything about my physical appearance anymore. I hate every encouraging word he has to say, and yet I feel like I need to be more appealing to him. I feel so much hurt. It's insane.
What's the laziest/easiest way you've lost weight? So, I was this lazy butt mother effer who loved nothing more than hogging on junk food and binge watching my favorite shows. I mean, who doesn't love a big old basket of fries and a cold fizzy drink? But you know what? My body wasn't too happy about it. I was getting fat, slow, and old before my time. My joints were creaking, and my back hurt like a female. That's when I knew I had to make a change. But let's get real, I wasn't about to cut out my delicious comfort food or hit the gym every day. So, what did I do? I took the easiest, laziest, and the most brilliant way out. I started walking. Yes, you heard that right, walking. I know it sounds too easy, but hear me out. I didn't sign up for any fancy fitness classes or buy expensive gym memberships. Nope, I simply walked around my neighborhood every day, for about 30 minutes. And boy, did it work. Within a few weeks, not only did I start losing weight, but my energy levels shot up too. I could walk faster, longer, and without getting out of breath. And you know what the best part was? I didn't have to cut out my fries or cheeseburgers. I could still enjoy them, but with a lot more moderation. What started as a lazy attempt at losing weight, turned into this amazing journey of self-discovery. I realized that sometimes, the simplest solutions are the most effective. I could feel myself getting better, stronger, and healthier every day. So, if you're like me, and can't be asked to hit the gym or go on a strict diet, try walking. It may seem like a small thing, but trust me, it can work wonders for your body and soul. Making my family member and her infant leave during a wedding ceremony? My brother got married last weekend in a church and my entire extended family was there. My brother and his fiancée were adamant on the reception being child-free except for my 10-year-old cousin because she's well-behaved and one of the only children in our family right now. My cousin has an 8-month-old son that she brought with her to the area for the weekend, but she also brought a nanny to watch him while we're all at the wedding. She ended up bringing him to the ceremony at the church, which we didn't know she was going to do, then have the nanny watch him during the reception. During the ceremony he started babbling and talking and wouldn't stop. He didn't cry or anything, but he was very loud and making disruptions. My brother's fiancée was visibly angry, kept turning around to glare at them, but no one said anything. After it went on for about 10 minutes during the ceremony, I turned around and asked her to take the baby outside, which she did. After the ceremony, that whole side of the family was very angry with me. My one aunt kept saying how mad she was that I made her grandson leave the wedding. They continued to talk about this all during the pictures and said that he was fine because he wasn't crying, he was just mumbling. They're very family oriented, so they were all pissed at me for a while after that. But since it was my brother and his fiancée's day, I wanted it to be perfect for them and to help them out since my now sister-in-law was visibly very angry at the altar. Am I the a-hole for making my cousin leave the ceremony with her loud kid? Edit, I really appreciate the amount of people telling me I'm a hero or the best sister-in-law ever, really helps me justify my actions here. My family made me feel really shitty that day. My brother and sister-in-law thanked me briefly and we moved on, so we didn't continue the drama with that side of the family. What's something effed up you witnessed during your childhood, but didn't realize the severity of until you were older? My 4th grade English teacher accidentally gave me a document he had written. It was on an old floppy disk he assumed was blank. It described how he volunteered with an humanitarian group in the 70s that traveled through impoverished countries and provided free PP snips. They eventually trained him how to do it, and he would do them, even though he had no real medical training. This is not even the messed up part. He goes on to explain that he decided that he wanted the snip and to do it himself. He then described in very graphic detail how he did it to himself. He even said the date, March 1, 1981. He described in detail cutting through things, and how rubbery it felt, and even drew a diagram of how he did it. Again, not the messed up part. I thought the story was hilarious because he wrote PP so many times, and I was a 4th grader. Well, I spread the story around to my friends. It eventually spread to a parent that shared it with the school. His wife, who was also a teacher there, promptly quit. Their son, who was younger than me, born in the 90s, also left the school. He kept his job. What I figured out much later was that his wife had cheated on him and had gotten pregnant, but pretended like it was his. The effed up part is that he obviously knew she cheated, but never told her. He had raised the boy as his own son. Once she realized he was sterile, and he's known the entire time, she left him and took the kid. Had I not shared that story, that kid could have lived his entire life without knowing, and that family could have stayed together. But I just had to run my mouth. What's the craziest thing you've seen happen during a bank robbery? It was the Friday before a holiday weekend in 1987. It was NY City and State Pay Week in a blue-collar community that had a high percentage of civil service workers. The lines at the small savings bank that I worked for, as a teller at the time, were about 2 hours long. It was about 3 to 4 hours before closing, and the bank closed at 3 p.m. sharp. The bank did not have an ATM, nor did they offer debit cards or even credit cards at that time. I was performing a transaction for a customer who had multiple deposits, checks to cash and other assorted transactions. While I was working on the customer's accounts, a friend of the customer who was at my window walked in off of the street and struck up a conversation with her. I just had a feeling that this friend of hers was going to try to pull a fast one on all of the people that had been waiting online for a long time. After I finished the deposits, the customer thanked me and walked away from my window. Her friend then turned to the window and put her transitions through the slot for me to take care of. At that moment, the bank went silent. I did not look up to see if any of the other customers were watching. I asked her loud enough for the other customers to hear, "Are you looking to perform transactions today?" When she said yes, I told her, loudly without being obnoxious, that there are other people that have been waiting before her and that she would have to get on the line. For the next 2 hours or so, every customer who came to my window, and a few who didn't, thanked me with that look on their face as to say, she had a lot of nerve. I'm just glad that I did what I did. There would have probably been a riot if I hadn't. Friday's my last day, if you say so. A little background. I work in the film/TV industry. At the time of this story I was working an entry-level position called production assistant, PA for short, on a failing TV show. My duties included office upkeep, stocking the kitchen, research for coworkers, various paperwork, picking up supplies from vendors, and picking up lunch for everyone in the department, among a long list of other tasks. Now I really liked my immediate boss, coordinator number 1. The two of us had a system to keep the office running, and were starting to become friends. The problem? Our department head was a close-minded and racist butt, at the height of the #MeToo movement I might add. After one too many demeaning darlings, winks, sneaking his girlfriend into the office, and flipping through Tinder on company time, coordinator number 1 reported him to the higher-ups. But in typical Hollywood fashion they gave him a gentle slap on the wrist and sent him back to the department. So, coordinator number 1 left the show in disgust. Enter coordinator number 2. I knew number 2 and I wouldn't get along immediately. She had been fired from her previous TV show for attitude problems. On her first day she chewed me out for, I poop you not, hanging the actor photos 11 inches too low on the wall. It only got worse from there. This woman sucked up to the creepy department head, found faults with everyone around her, and loved power trips. She quickly made herself a nuisance to everyone in the department. But creepy department head was too busy with Tinder to do anything. Between her constant berating, treating me like I was stupid, and unprofessional rudeness, she made my life a living hell. The final straw came when she screamed at me in front of the entire department for a small mistake. I almost packed my bag and walked out right there. In hindsight I should have. But she told me I'd be replaced at the end of the month, so I thought I'd hang in there and collect a paycheck while I could. From then on, I counted down the days, and made no attempt to hide my misery. The thing is, the TV show had barely started filming and we were already severely behind schedule. The poor construction department was building sets 24/7, and the first episode was supposed to air in the next few weeks. For everyone in our department this meant extremely long hours and working 6 days a week. Not my problem. I was leaving soon. Number 2 reminded me on the last week. Friday is your last day. It ended up being a hell of a week. More long hours and running behind schedule. The department would need to work another Saturday. Well, Friday came, and I gleefully counted down the hours. At the end of the day number 2 realized her mistake. She hustled over to me on my way out the door. Can you work Saturday? Cue malicious compliance. Nope. You said Friday is my last day. That's when she got huffy. I'm trying to get you some extra money. Giving up one day of my measly PA paycheck was well worth the look on her face when I said, no thanks. Friday is my last day. Bye. And walked out to happily never see her again. I took a job on a much better TV show a few weeks later with the nicest crew. To this day I've worked on lots of other shows, and I always warn my coworkers not to ever work with her. Turns out she has quite the bad reputation around town even without my help. The fallout after I left. Now that there was no PA working Saturday, number 2 had no choice but to do both her job and mine. Years later I'm now a coordinator, and I can tell you it's a job that keeps you busy. There's no way I'd be able to get anything done without the help of my amazing PAs. So it gives me extreme satisfaction to know she had to get off her high horse, halt her very important emails, and go get everyone lunch and snackies until my replacement was found. My ex-wife dropped back into my life after 6 years. My ex and I met in college and were madly in love all 4 years in school. Got married after graduation in 2010. In 2013 I caught her in a year-plus affair with a coworker. I was crushed. She said they loved each other, soulmates, didn't mean to hurt anyone, blah blah blah. We divorced only 3 months later. I was crushed. Worst time in my life. I mourned for over a year. I heard they got married. One day I decided I was tired of being sad, so I completely let go of her in my heart, got off my butt and truly moved on. I'm a programmer by profession and decided to take a pre-sales solutions consultant gig with one of the biggest software companies on the planet. That job has been amazing. I've traveled the entire world. Every continent and all the major cities. Life has been a great adventure. I never did date seriously or remarry. I'm not opposed to casual dating and have dated beautiful women all over the globe. After my experience with marriage I decided that wasn't my path and have been happy. Sometimes lonely, especially during holidays, but overall happy. I had decided enough traveling for a while, so I switched roles and am based in a major city in the US. I'm sitting in a diner on a Saturday morning eating breakfast and reading the news, Facebook, Reddit, etc., and somebody says my name. Oh my god. The voice sounded like one of my women friends at work, so I looked up to say hi and my jaw dropped. It's my ex-wife. Here I am 2,000 plus miles away from our old hometown, haven't seen her in almost 6 years and there she is. I was dumbstruck. All I could manage was hi. I hate to say it, but she looked beautiful. She said I looked amazing. She asked if I was busy and that she didn't want to bother me but that she'd love to talk. I said sure. We ended up talking for over 2 hours and continued for another couple of hours when we went for a walk in a close-by park. We were making small talk about mutual acquaintances, my stories of traveling the globe. Everything but the elephant in the room. She finally asked me if I had gotten remarried at any point. I said no, once was enough. She seemed sad by that. We walked in silence for maybe a minute and she said, I have to say that I'm so sorry for what I did to you. You didn't deserve it. It was incredibly messed up and has haunted me since it happened. You didn't do anything wrong. I said you fell in love with someone else and married them. I couldn't stop you from doing that. I wanted you to be happy. Then I asked, are you happy? She laughed one of those joke laughs, ha. She told me the OM and her fought constantly and he ended up cheating on her and leaving her 2 years into marriage. I said, I'm sorry that happened to you. I know how bad that can hurt. She said she knew. That when her heart was broken all she could think of was that she had done the same thing to me and that tortured her. She said she fell apart for almost a year, engaged in very self-destructive behavior, and then went to therapy to figure out why she's so screwed up. She said that was extremely helpful and several years ago she finally grew up and holds herself accountable for her own actions now. She had ended up moving to this city because she has an aunt that she loves that lives there, and after her second divorce before age 30 she needed to make big changes in her life. The changes were noticeable. She's definitely more mature. I had to go and get ready for the evening with friends, so we said our goodbyes. We exchanged contact info and agreed to go have coffee and talk more. We have been doing that. We're both single. I guess there's no harm. I can tell she wants more from me. She wants me to want her back. She drops hints as big as the Pacific Ocean. I'm not dumb. I have to admit she still has that certain something that just makes my heart skip a beat. Something I can't describe. Something I hadn't found in anyone else since her. I guess it's chemistry. Between us. To be honest, I want to be more than friends. I want to hold her and kiss her. She wants that too, but as of yet I've made 0 moves. What holds me back? Fear. I'm afraid of getting hurt again. If she had been a casual girlfriend that dumped me I would have shook it off and moved on quickly. She wasn't though. She was my wife and the love of my life. I used to dream of her somehow coming back into my life. Well, here it is and I'm scared crapless. I don't know if I can give her that much of myself again. I'm way more protective of my heart now. We've both grown a lot in the past, seems like 100 years ago. If she wasn't who she is I'd already be head over heels in love. I struggle with, do I pursue love with her again or do I leave the past in the past? It sounds cliche but it just had to be her. Of all the people I could have met here it had to be her. Update, the update is we got remarried over the Christmas holidays and we're now pregnant. She has grown a lot as a person. So have I. We're not kids anymore. We're in an adult relationship and it's much better than before. Throw in the chemistry we've always had and it's wonderful. I couldn't be happier. I do want to address the accusations that she tracked me down. She didn't. She had moved to our current city before I did. She really had moved on, went to therapy, and had grown a lot as a person. I just happened to be in that diner. We think it had to be fate or some type of intervening force. Neither of us are religious, but the astronomical odds of us running into each other, both single, and in a city neither of us had ever lived in, are hard to ignore. Obviously, the universe had a plan for us. I wish all of you good luck. My only advice is don't close your heart. You never know who will stroll into your life. Am I the a-hole for getting my toddlers high? I'm 32 and a huge pothead. When I was 25, I met my current girlfriend in line for the bathroom at a Nickelback concert and we hooked up that night. I guess she wasn't on birth control because she got pregnant and told me about it a month later. Well, I'm pro 420 but I'm also pro-life and very religious, so we decided to make our relationship official for the sake of the baby. Ever since my twins were born, I have loved them so much and I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet for my family. Unfortunately, working these long hours tires me out beyond belief, so when I get home I usually blaze up on the couch and watch something relaxing like Judge Judy. My girlfriend sometimes gets mad at me for smoking in the house while the kids are there, but they're in a different room so I don't think it really matters all that much. Anyway, we had their birthday pretty recently at our house, and it was awful because there were like 15 kids running around screaming at the top of their lungs. It was a super stressful situation for me, but I had an idea. I had just made a bunch of edible brownies, and I decided to put them out for the kids. I was hoping that they would eat them and mellow out for a bit and it actually worked perfectly. We sent them home, and some of their parents even thanked us because it seemed like their kids were really relaxed afterwards. I told my girlfriend about my awesome plan and she completely flipped out at me. She claims I was endangering all of these kids' lives, but I think I was just making everyone's lives so much easier.
My mother accidentally left our sleeping son in the car. Did my husband overreact? My mom, 47, has always babysat our kids while we work. My kids, 7 months and 4, they adore her so much. And she's awesome with them. I, 26, and my husband, 34, both work full-time jobs and our daughter is in preschool so my mom only watches our 7-month-old son right now. She frequently runs errands and is out and about, and doing things for her sort of work from home. Tonight she had to run to the next town over to handle something for work. It was a warm 87-degree day. Evidently she ran into the building for 20 minutes and when she returned she was mortified when she realized she left my sleeping son in the car. He was perfectly fine and still asleep. Never fussed and he was happy when he got home. She was in tears when she dropped him off because she knows how horrifically she messed up. I told my husband when he got home and he checked over the baby again himself. My husband was furious and threatened to call the police on her and said she should never watch our kids again because she was negligent. I was able to talk him down some and he still said she should not ever leave the house with our son again. I told him I know it could have been the worst thing in the world, but we got lucky and he's okay. It's a mistake either one of us could have made and I think he's overreacting. Now he's furious with me because he thinks I'm underreacting and don't care about our baby's well-being. He says we have to do something about it. So am I the a-hole for being okay with her still watching our son? Did my husband overreact?
Would I be the jerk for calling off a wedding because my fiancé is extremely frugal? I 31 struggle with my fiancé's 32 frugalness and not sure if I want to marry him anymore after 3-year relationship. I met my fiancé 3 years ago. He came out of an abusive marriage just 2 years before we met. One of her absolute abuses was financial. She bled him dry. Made him buy expensive jewelry only to give it away or break it after an argument. Designer shoes, clothes, big house cars. Caribbean trips. You name it, she made him pay for it. She also took him to the cleaners in the divorce. However, my fiancé is very well off. He makes far over 6 figures, almost 7. On top of that, he inherited a few millions from his grandfather and his parents gifted him and his siblings also a few cool millions. So yes, the financial abuse was bad, but he does not suffer financially. He has more money than he will ever need. So last year I moved into his house. I do not pay rent, but I split the bills and buy food. I pay for my own clothes and jewelry. I have a good job and I can take care of myself. However, things have been taking a turn for the worse and I feel miserable. His house was empty when I moved in. He had hand-me-down furniture. Maybe 3 forks and 2 knives. He wouldn't put on the heating so the house felt cold and moldy. He has no curtains, no decorations. His ex took everything not bolted down and he was too cheap to replace it. Just imagine $1 million house like that. I am grateful that I can live in his house. It is something I could never afford myself. But I didn't want to live in squalor. So I bought some kitchen supplies, some furniture. But at some point I realized I was dipping in my savings all the time and he did nothing. I looked into curtains, but those things are expensive. His house has so many windows it is crazy. I didn't want to pay for this anymore. I told him I needed a fund to furnish his house. He blew up at me that I was just with him for his money. I pointed out all the money I spend on his house. The gifts and the trips because he pays for nothing ever. Because he wants to be sure I am not here for the money. The fact is, if we break up I have nothing. The house is not mine. If I spend all my savings on his house I will be left with absolutely nothing. He wants a prenup and I am fine with that, but I can't help but feel used. Next to that I am jealous of his ex-wife. I feel like she got treated and I am neglected. He proposed to his ex on a cruise with My boyfriend broke up with me because I have ginger hair. Yep, the title is real. Background: I, 25, and Brad, 30, were dating for about 6 months. Our relationship was near perfect, and even though it was too soon to say, I was looking at rings. We always talked about getting married, and my naive self believed that Brad and I were going to have a happily ever after. One day, Brad sat me down and with a very serious face, told me that we had to break up. I was heartbroken, and I begged him why. He went around in circles for a while, and after I begged him for the millionth time, he said it was because of my hair. I thought it was because of how my hair is too short, so I told him I could just grow it out for him. He told me it was because it was ginger and he hated the color red on hair. He couldn't have a future with me because he loved blondes and wanted blonde children. This was one thing he couldn't compromise on, and even though he claimed he loved me, he didn't want ginger children. He said that ginger people are evil and he didn't want to bring more evil into the world. The thing is, my hair isn't ginger. Yes, it is dyed ginger, but I'm a natural blonde. I stood there in disbelief. I tried to tell him it was dyed and he said he didn't believe me, because he knew deep down I was evil. Now it is years later, I am now 35 and he is 40. We both found different people to settle down with, me a brown-haired man, him a blonde woman. I have 3 children, all of which are blonde. And him? He's texting me, begging for me back. Why? All of his kids are ginger. Guess he was the evil one after all. My family won't talk about what my sister did, so I'm writing it in a book instead. My family has always hated me and I don't know why. I never did anything to them. I'm just a little weird and I ask a totally normal amount of questions. My sister was going to dental school. I asked why and my parents got mad. Then my sister, who can't even look at a needle or blood, went to an orthodontist school. I asked questions like, what did she learn? Is she going to have her own practice or going with someone else? Has she looked into scholarships? Why would she go into ortho if she hated dental so much? Then my family got really mad at me for asking these questions, as they gave her $250,000 to do dental and ortho school and me nothing to go to journalism school. I was living in a mice-infested apartment with a crazy guy in an untreated medical condition that caused so much pain. I took Advil every day and got an ulcer. Whatever. I get it. They love her and hate me. It's always been like that. Turns out sister was faking dental and ortho school and telling people she was a practicing dentist so she could get free private luxury apartments for years. Never have to work and scam a guy into a relationship. $250,000 so she could scratch her butt for 9 solid years. 1 year of dental was a real year off, 3 years fake dental, then 3 fake professionals. Now I'm figuring the parents are mad at me for asking questions because they were probably in on it the whole time or something. I have tried to ask them what happened, but they get furious. How am I supposed to forgive anyone if I am not allowed to know anything? What exactly is their defense when they found out they bought her a car and gave her $65,000 to pay off the 1 year she really did go to part of it for free, no strings attached? Now the journal school I attended actually worked out. I'm writing a book and just got a tentative offer for a $50,000 advance. It is not about my life or family, but the agent, publishers and reviewers keep asking for more of my life. A little bit more memoir to go with the facts. So if I need to include stuff from my life and if my family refuses to talk to me about it like an adult, I guess it has to go in the book? I can work it into the theme.
Ada for shouting at my attention WH sister while she's on her deathbed? The answer's no. My 26F sister Nancy, 39F, and I have had a strained relationship for as long as I can remember. Nancy's parents were my late aunt and uncle, who passed away in a car accident when she was 6 and my parents adopted her. Growing up, I realized that she got more love and care than I did, but I just wrote it off because I didn't want to blame her for her trauma or how she handles triggers. When I was a teen, I got tired of her always needing to trump my accomplishments or be the center of attention. I finished high school when I was 16, and after I received my matric results, my parents planned a big party for me, but the week before, Nancy fell down a flight of stairs and my party had to be cancelled. As I was sitting in the waiting room with my parents, I had an epiphany and realized that a lot of her accidents coincidentally happened when something big was planned for me. For example, a month before my 21st birthday, which was going to be spent on a cruise, she started having dizzy spells, and a few days before, she fell off the roof as she was trying to patch a few leaks. Rightfully, I was upset, and my parents lashed out at me for being selfish when my sister got injured trying to do something to help them. When I graduated with my MBA at 22, she became very sick after eating shellfish, which everyone knows she is deathly allergic to. The day after my partner proposed, she got into an accident while driving on a sunny day with great road conditions, saying that she didn't see a light pole or something. He threw me a surprise engagement party, and guess who accidentally ate prawns and was rushed to the hospital halfway through the party? To avoid any drama at my wedding, my partner and I decided to elope with a few friends, and it was the first time something was all about me. My parents were bitter about not being part of wedding celebrations, so we planned a reception type thing for friends and family on our second anniversary. My dad will walk me down the aisle and my mom will do the something old thing. They had been buzzing with excitement and looking forward to the wedding. The event is this coming weekend and guests have already started flying in as they want to celebrate the whole week and treat it as a reunion of sorts. But like every other big moment of my life, I am sitting in the hospital waiting room because Nancy apparently had a big psychotic break because her boyfriend dumped her in February. It's freaking August, so there's a psychiatrist admitting her for 21 days as he believes she's a danger to herself. My parents are trying to talk me into postponing because it would be heartless of me to celebrate while my sister is cuffed to a bed and in high risk of unaliving herself for the next 3 weeks. I had a meltdown of my own and told my sister that if she wanted to go to heaven that desperately, could she not have done it when we were younger so I could be spared from all her drama, and now there's a handful of family members who are calling me a cruel bridezilla for taking my stress out on my sister when she's so unwell. I told all of them that I would be proceeding with the wedding as a lot of time and money had already gone into it and they're welcome to mope around the hospital to support my sister. They told me that I was unfair for making them have to choose between a party and my sister who is on her deathbed.
What's the most embarrassing gay thing you ever did? When I was 11, I got my first girlfriend and I was nervous because I had never dated anyone and I know I'm socially awkward. One day I decided I was going to try and put my head on her shoulder, but when I put my head down I bumped into hers. I panicked and sat back up. She said it was okay and told me to try it again, but I was too embarrassed. A few months later I decided I wanted to kiss her. I asked her if I could after church and she said yes. We stood there looking at each other in silence for God knows how long until she said, "So, are you gonna kiss me?" I waited a second, then I kissed her on the lips. I got so nervous after that I ran away. I remember being so embarrassed and I'll probably never forget it.
Keep stealing my donuts? Enjoy eating my kids. Obligatory. This happened 10 years ago. I was 18M and lived with my parents and sister 15F. She was my parents' clear favorite and they didn't exactly hide that from me. Anytime I'd come home with snacks I bought, my sister almost always found them and took them, especially my donuts. I knew it was her because I caught her multiple times. I'd always confront her but she would just try to gaslight me. I told my parents but they would always believe whatever nonsense lie she came up with. This kept happening for way too long until I decided I had enough. One day I bought my usual donut. I went to the toilet, rubbed one out, then sprayed my seed all over it, put it back in its bag and in the cupboard and waited. I come back to find that it's half eaten instead of fully gone this time. So I continue this for the next couple of days, each bite getting less and less. Then I decided to go all out. I sprayed my DNA all over it, wiped part of it up my crack to add fragrance, and then I dipped it in the toilet. Safe to say that after she took a bite of that one, I never had this problem again.
What's the most unprofessional thing a doctor has done during a consultation? I was 18 and in my first semester of college when I started getting this effing intense stomach pain. It had been going on for 2 weeks, and at first, I thought it was just gas, but the pain got so bad that it affected my appetite and sleep. One morning, the pain woke me up at 5 a.m., and I could barely walk to my school's health center. When I got there, they asked me to wait in a room as they called a doctor to see me. The pain was escalating like crazy, so I was desperate for relief. Finally, the doctor came in and said he wanted to do an exam right away because he suspected appendicitis based on my symptoms. He asked if I had ever had a medical exam before, which I hadn't, then proceeded to explain that the exam would involve him sticking his finger up my butt to press on my lower abdomen from behind, which he acknowledged might be slightly uncomfortable, but assured me that no clothing needed removing since it'd focus around my belly button area. That's when things took a turn for the weird. As soon as he put his fingers on each side of my belly button, he recoiled abruptly without explanation, then left the room saying another doctor would come in instead. The second doc came with a nurse who asked if she could remove my pants while her colleague went off for supplies, reassuringly mentioning everything would be covered by insurance as part of standard procedure, though unsure what this entailed exactly. Still desperate for relief, so reluctantly agreed anyway. She struggled getting past all that pubic hair, so asked if she could pull down both sides of boxers/briefs instead, which elicited laughter from her colleague, but consented as long as nothing below mid-thigh level exposed. So there she is tugging down both sides simultaneously while her colleague laughs about our university's football team, which she happened to be an alumna. Meanwhile here's me lying there feeling embarrassed and exposed with only underwear/shirt/jacket/tie, bare buttocks visible through partially exposed sheets, being touched through thin fabric by unfamiliar hands. After what felt like forever they finally said okay, we're good. Then turned and asked if anything else needed doing before leaving. Feeling confused and vulnerable, politely declined any additional assistance. They left, leaving me alone trying to process this bizarre experience.
What's your you're not joking moment? Had a neighbor who was a single guy in his 40s, divorced, had a college-aged daughter that stayed with him half the time. Seemed like they were having a sort of family reunion one weekend, and I saw him talking with others out on his back deck. A little while later I went over to ask to borrow something. His daughter answered and I asked if her dad was there. She said her dad was dead, and I just chuckled and was like, haha, yeah right. She just looked at me and turned around crying and went back inside. Her mom, his ex-wife, came out right away and saw I was confused, shocked, and very apologetic. She was really nice about it, saying it had just happened and was the first time the daughter had had to answer the door. Apparently he had committed self-destruction. I obviously felt so terrible, apologized profusely. I thought for sure I had just seen him. And the way the daughter had announced it seemed almost lighthearted. Turns out who I saw on the back deck was his brother, who looked a lot like him, and all the family was there for the funeral.
He scoffed at me, so I got him fired and sent back to his country. So let me preface this by saying I do feel somewhat bad about the events that transpired, but it would be eating my conscience to say I didn't do it on purpose because I did. I started my first full-time job when I was 20, fresh off college and ready to take on the world. I resided in a Middle Eastern country, where people got brought in frequently by employers, and one mistake could cost them everything. I was outside this, because I was a resident of the place despite not being from there. Anyways, when I first started, I got along very well with my coworker despite the fact that he came off as a lot of bad things for me. We tried hanging out, but the more I got to know him, the more disgusted I became. He was exist, a purist of his religion where he believes execution of certain people should be allowed, and he was extremely homophobic. But nonetheless, I tried making friends with him, because I was open to anything. In our office, we have a portable Wi-Fi that he took with him every day, free internet, and I never commented on this because I have my own. I can afford it and so can he, more on this later. The closer I got to him, the more he opened up, but in the worst ways. He would send me lewd images while we're in the office of women, talk about drug use, and sometimes disappear from work for hours on end while I'm in the office. Like I said, I was 20, I was still young and naive, and I tried my best to seem calm and friendly. I wanted to make an impression. This man, however, was the opposite. He was several years older than me, and acted like he was above me through every step. But I ignored it, because I wanted to be civil. Sometimes I would help him with his work until eventually his work became mine. He would just expect me to do it, without even lending a hand. I didn't say anything, I just did it. His missing from the office became more frequent. Sometimes he would only be at work for a measly 2 hours out of 9 hours, popping in and out, and the office manager is too chicken shit to say anything to the general manager. Then there's the lateness, where I would come in on time every day, and he'd come an hour late. Still, I kept my mouth shut. It escalated to him adjusting attendance records so it seems like he's not absent. Even though his absences were frequent, unfortunately he was put in charge of that too. I remained quiet throughout all of this, remained civil until finally I spoke to the general manager about pursuing a different line of work. I was always into graphic design, and they needed to get some work done so I offered to do it. But during this time, I couldn't afford much things anymore because I had to help pay for bills for my parents, so I usually just walked to work back and forth every day and limited my eating to once a day, meaning the Wi-Fi was no longer something I could afford. So, as an agreement, I could take the office Wi-Fi with me and work on designs from home. However, my coworker didn't agree to this, and pretty much attacked me with a barrage of insults. He scoffed at the fact that I needed the Wi-Fi to do design work and said I was a joke. I've suppressed majority of what the conversation held, but it went something like this. Me, I just need it tonight, you can have the Wi-Fi tomorrow. Him, why? It's not yours. Me, I need to do some design work. Him, yeah, me too. I need to do that too. So, leave it here. I couldn't remember much of what else he said, but there was a scoff after he said that. And he made fun that my design sucked and that I should just stop while I'm ahead. My blood boiled and I reached a point of no return. I immediately phoned the office manager and talked about the situation and how if I don't get the Wi-Fi, I'll complain to the general manager, who did in fact give me his blessing unlike this turd. He immediately called my coworker and told him to give me the Wi-Fi, which he did, and that was that. Except, I'm a petty person, and I'm not about to let some ashole get off with a slap on the wrist. The next day, I went to the head office, and had a meeting with the general manager. I spoke to him about all the misconducts this guy had, how he's always late, never in the office, changes his absences, steals money sometimes, etc. I spilled my heart out on all his wrongdoings, showing the messages and photos I was sent during shift that I never asked for, and how I'm doing all of his work. It escalated to a point where he got brought into the main office for a meeting, where I proceeded to berate him in front of the manager, and he could only try to defend himself, but I was prepared. It turns out the office manager never even spoke to the general manager about his misconduct. Afterwards, he was brought back to the office having been yelled at by both my and the general manager. And I could say that's where it ends, except it's not. After he left, the general manager realized if I had been doing all the work, then why didn't I say anything? I responded that I was simply there to work, and to help. However, with what just happened, and the fact that this guy was getting paid more than me, I've decided that if he's here, then I won't be staying in the company. I gave him a choice, me, or this guy. The answer was obvious, because by the next day he was handed a termination letter, and another letter that states he's been booked a ticket and he has to head back to his home country within a month, and he's barred from entering the country for several years due to his public misconduct that was reported by a certain someone to the local authorities. I could say that's the end, but okay, this is the last one, I swear. See, he had a girlfriend back home, a fiancée more like, whom he has been cheating on. Funny enough, he added me on Facebook when we first met, and she proceeded to add me too, because he talks about me to her. Well, our messages wasn't just inappropriate, it showed details of him cheating on her, with me questioning him if that's a good idea. Every screenshot, sent. All the photos of the women he's been with, sent. She was livid, and I kept apologizing for keeping her in the dark, but that I thought she deserved to know at least. I haven't spoken to her since, but judging from the fact that her Facebook status no longer states she's engaged to him, is enough of a confirmation. I sent him one last thing before blocking him on every social media we've been connected in. You deserve this, shithead. It's been several months since then, and I'm thriving at work. I got a raise, I have better coworkers, and I'm getting a promotion. As for him, well, he's out there somewhere in the world, who knows, and who cares, right? We're no longer in the same country, so whatever else happens to him no longer phases me. Though, he did once send me a photo of his fake Italian ID, because he was planning on illegally migrating there next year. I'm on the fence if I should send it to the authorities in Italy or not. Just as a precaution, I might considering migrating there at some point. My nephew is my son but not even his mother knows. A few years ago my wife and I went to a party with my sister-in-law while we were visiting her at college. I ended up hanging out with my sister-in-law most of the night. My wife gets super tired and ends up getting in bed with her sister and her sister's friend. I'm still having fun and drinking quite a bit. I ended up talking to some random dude. His girlfriend comes over while we're talking and I see my sister-in-law walk by, saying she isn't sleepy and wants to have fun and sits on my lap. We stay up for another hour or so drinking with them. Random dude says he and his girlfriend are going to his place so we can use his girlfriend's bed upstairs. We were both intoxicated. I think she was worse than me at this point. The couple leave and my sister-in-law and I are the only ones up. We were just laughing at each other and went upstairs to chill. I had a stiffy from her sitting on me but I honestly was not expecting what happened next. I go in the room first and flop face down on the bed. She turns off the lights and gets on the bed too. As I roll over she gets on top of me and starts making moves. I remember her taking her becoming unclothed and making fun of me for still wearing my jeans. We were warming up for a little bit and she whispered "F me" in my ear. My pee-pee was out but my pants were still on so I got her off me and stood up to take them off. She was laying on her stomach and looked better than a pizza on the munchies. The position she was in was inviting. When I finished I laid down beside her and her face was away from me towards the wall. I said something to her and she didn't respond, she was asleep. I've thought about it a million times since then and I'm pretty sure she must have still been awake when I started. I honestly did not think she was going to not remember it the next day, but I was pretty freaked out that I was going to have to deal with what we did in the morning. The next day my wife woke me up all normal and wanted to go get coffee and greasy food. I go with her and feel horrible inside. We get back and my sister-in-law is at her apartment and is freaked out. Later my wife tells me she thinks she was roped, and her friends think it's this guy who she dated who was at the party. About 4 days after this she pulls me aside and asks me if I know anything, and admits that she was flirting with me. She grabbed my manhood on top of my clothes as a joke. I told her she went upstairs and I went back to the apartment. She got pregnant that night, and my whole extended family and her friends think it's this guy. She drops out after that and comes to live with her parents. Her official story is that her and that dude were making out and he ended up having intimacy with her when she was intoxicated and she doesn't remember much but he's an a-hole. She never pressed charges or anything because she feels guilty or thinks she probably let him do it, but most of all I think she wants to stick to her story and not reveal that she remembers sitting flirting with me. Now there's a 2-year-old awesome little boy living at my in-laws' house and I see him all the time. We never talk about the kid's dad. Everyone has moved on and everybody is pretty happy. My sister-in-law is dating a pretty cool guy and she finishes her bachelor's next semester and my wife and I are doing really well. Last night we were all at my in-laws and my nephew was showing me his toys and just stopped, dropped them and gave me a big hug and laid his head on my shoulder and didn't let go. I started fully crying and have felt like complete crap all day today. I think I'll confess. My nephew is my son but not even his mother knows. My wife could tell something was up with me and we ended up getting in a little fight because I didn't want to talk about it. I had gone over it in my head a million times, and I decided the only right thing to do was to tell my wife the truth and take it from there. My plan was basically to lay myself wide open at her feet and just do whatever she wanted. I walked into the front room and turned off the TV she was watching. My wife knew something was up and I immediately started tearing up a little. I yelled at her to sit down after she had stood up to hug me. She did, looked frightened and asked,
"What's this about?"
I said it was about Jimmy's father, who his father is. I had stopped crying but was so ashamed to even continue, I needed her to ask a question or poke me. I was looking down at the carpet, and when I looked up my wife's face was stone cold serious. Her arms were folded and she said,
"You better not say what I think you're going to say."
I buried my face in the cushion and started to cry, and when I looked up again my wife's face was so amazingly stoic and weird I got a little scared and stopped crying. She said she knew it and sounded disappointed. She said a lot of stuff, like she noticed me and Megan didn't touch any more since that night, and how many times she questioned Megan about that night. She said that Megan's friend had told her she was with me most of the night so I must have seen her with that other guy. I think I just said I'm sorry and I know but she did the majority of the talking, or I should say yelling. She was pacing all around the room and she was getting more and more worked up with every word. It was so weird, she was so angry. I thought for sure she would jump straight to throwing me out of the house but instead she mostly just said how she knew. I think she said we were both disgusting and said she hopes I'm ready to take care of Jimmy for the rest of his life, and how I'm not ever going to do anything with my life before that kid is taken care of. I agreed to that and she went into our room and slammed the door shut. I was in shock, and I could hear her crying super hard in the bedroom. I didn't know what to do at that point so I went on the back porch and sat on the top of the stairs and laid back staring up at the stars. I heard her leave out the front door and drive off and I just laid there. I guess about 15 minutes to half an hour later I heard her come back in, and open the sliding door to the porch. I turned and looked at her, she looked pretty beaten up from crying but other than that looked normal. I said, "What do you want me to do?" "I'll do anything," and she said,
"I know, come inside."
I came in and sat on the couch. She sat down next to me and asked me if I clearly remember that night, and asked if Megan has always known. I told her I don't know anything and have never talked to Megan about it and that I just have always thought I was the monster in the situation and wanted to die. Then out of the blue my wife hugged me and said,
"I love you."
I fully lost it, I started bawling uncontrollably and laid my head on her lap. She went on to say that she knew I didn't have a very experienced intimate history, and that her sister was really good at getting men to do what she wanted. She told me I need to take ownership of this and I was fully responsible and an a-hole but believes that it was her sister who was the root problem and not the other way around. I couldn't believe it, she was so crazy for forgiving me and caring. She sat me up and said that we need to talk to Megan, and that I need to think about Jimmy and what's best for him. We talked some more and discussed stuff like telling or not telling Jimmy and wondered if Megan knows or not. We ended up going to bed really late together, and I know it sounds weird but we had crazy intimacy. The next morning was Sunday and my wife texted Megan to come over and we were going to get breakfast, but to leave Jimmy at her parents' house. When she got here I was not nervous at all, my wife was acting more nervous. When she came in, she was acting all normal and my wife. I asked her to sit down. My wife looked at me and motioned for me to talk. I said something like, "Megan, remember the night you got pregnant?" She looked at me all weird. I said, "Remember we were hanging out after everyone else went to bed?" She looked at my wife but my wife was looking at me. Megan nodded slowly, seeming to shake now. "Well, I think I remember a lot more than you," I said, waiting to see if she was going to jump in with anything. Instead she said,
Okay, this is scaring me. What's going on?
and kept looking at my wife. My wife turned and stared at her and raised her eyebrows like she was saying, "You know what we're talking about." Megan started breathing really heavy and started to cry and said,
What the F is going on?
to my wife. And my wife said,
You effed my husband. I'm so sorry.
all while trying to hug her. My wife would not let her touch her, and just kept saying,
Did you know?
and
Was this all a lie from the beginning?
Megan kept saying no and she knew she might have slept with me but had no idea what had happened. She made up the story about the other guy so she wouldn't have to face the fact that she might have slept with me. Megan asked if her parents know, and my wife said no. My wife let Megan hug her and they both cried. Megan said she couldn't stay there and felt sick. She tried to leave, but my wife walked with her out the front door and I think they went on a walk or to a park in our neighborhood. It was so odd, they were gone for 2 hours and I was just by myself. I texted my wife but all she said was that they're working through it. When they finally got back my wife walked in and I heard Megan's car driving off. I literally never talked to Megan about that night, and I never have since. It ended like that and my wife handled the whole thing. We are going to go on living like nothing has changed and my in-laws do not know anything or anyone else. Jimmy will be told when he's older and we'll talk about that as a family later on. And that's pretty much it. My deadbeat parents demands a grandchild after my golden child brother died. So I told them I had a vasectomy and they will never have grandkids. My brother was awesome and my parents loved him. So did I. On the other hand, my parents tolerated me. I wasn't good at sports, or school, or anything really. I was pretty much an afterthought. When my brother got into medical school while I was in community college my parents helped him out so he could graduate without debt. He had a bright future ahead and they wanted him to achieve. I was told I had to get student loans, which I did. I also finally accepted my place in their world and went low contact. Mostly we only talked at some events for my brother. I ended up getting my master's and I like my career. I like helping people, but I had to plan for my future. I knew I could have a good life with a partner but that kids would lower my standard of living. So I got a vasectomy. I met my wife and she is on board with bringing child free. We have a small house in an local town and a couple of dogs. However, my brother died on his honeymoon. My parents are devastated. I'm not doing much better. My wife and I traveled to my hometown for the funeral. I saw my folks and went to see how they were. We hadn't spoken since my brother's wedding the previous month. They were obviously distraught. My mom said that when we had kids I should name one after my brother. I wasn't really thinking straight so I told the unvarnished truth. I had to choose between kids and paying off my student loans. She asked what I meant. So I admitted that I had gotten a vasectomy and would not be having kids. I always figured she would get her grandma's needs met by my brother. My dad blew up at me for making such a stupid decision. I had basically decided to end our branch of the family tree. I said that I always thought my brother would provide them with grandkids and that if I had kids they would be afterthoughts like I was. We went back home afterward instead of hanging around. My mom is having some sort of breakdown from my brother passing away and now me telling her that I will not be having children. My dad is just angry. I'm hearing from family that I was insensitive to put it the way I did. They have not shown much interest in me since I was 12. I don't really think I owe them anything. My dad called and offered to pay to get my vasectomy reversed. I told him my wife didn't want kids. I reminded him that we had told them that we were child-free and they didn't care until my brother died. Leave me for dead? I'll destroy your fraternity. So, you had a massive drinking problem. Most of the time that you were at this fraternity house, you were drunk off your ass. Basically a pitiful loser. They decided to rush you because they needed more bodies. But no one really wanted to be friends with the massive alcoholic. The fraternity let you drink as much as you wanted. Maybe they let a little peer pressure push you. But you were happy to drink more. Then, while puking your guts out, you expected one of the guys to let you sleep in his room. Because you wanted revenge on them for your own alcohol issue, you planted drugs on multiple members, including guys that had nothing to do with the attack on that girl or had drugs of their own. And now you sit back and enjoy the story of ruining young people's lives because you got them kicked out of school and a lifetime felony charge because you were depressed and an alcoholic and wanted them to be your therapist and your AA sponsor? This isn't a revenge story that you are going to get any high fives for. You literally set up innocent kids because you weren't happy with them not being your friend. But as you admitted, you were a horrible drunk before you were even rushed. I've never been in a fraternity but I hear enough stories. Sure, kids can be dicks, but you haven't given one example of anyone deserving to be set up like that. Why are they responsible for making sure you don't drink yourself to death when you had no issue drinking huge amounts before? If you had said one of the kids you set up knew you were going to need to be hospitalized or had forced you to drink more and more, then maybe it would be a good revenge story for him to be set up. But you literally destroyed kids' lives because they didn't want to be friends with you. That's fucked. My girlfriend left me on the day I was proposing without any explanation. The story includes me, 28, my girlfriend Elise, 27F, and her best friends Leah, 27F, and David, 27. Elise and I had been together for 3 years and living together for 1.5 years. Our relationship was very strong and we were madly in love. All of our friends always used to say that we were a perfect couple. Our communication was strong and we had everything planned in our lives. I told her that I won't be marrying her before I get a job that pays well enough to build our family, and she agreed. Well, I got a very good job 2 months ago and we started planning our lives together. Our plan was to get married in the next year or two, buy a house, and then have kids when we have more financial stability. She also started dropping hints that I should propose. I was already planning to propose, so I started researching for rings, proposal venues, etc. This is when I contacted Leah and asked her to meet me and keep it a secret. I told her my plans and she confirmed that Elise would love this and also gave me some suggestions which I loved. Leah also included David, as the three of them were best friends since childhood and knew each other very well. They also helped me pick the ring. The plan was to rent a cabin surrounded by nature and wilderness, as Elise likes that a lot. I rented the cabin and on Friday I took the day off without telling my girlfriend and met up with Leah and David and one of my friends to set up everything. I gave instructions to my friend about how I wanted everything to be set up, as he was supposed to go there the next day before us and set up everything, flowers, cameras, etc. I went back home after that and ordered Elise's favorite takeout. We talked about her day and then went to bed. Now a week ago Leah had invited Elise for brunch on Saturday, proposal day, at a new fancy place, the proposal location. She emphasized that the place was fancy so that Elise wouldn't get suspicious of Leah asking her to wear a nice dress. On Saturday morning Leah and David came to our apartment to pick up Elise. As soon as they left I called a friend of mine who was waiting just around the corner and I left soon after. Then I called my other friend who was supposed to be at the cabin and asked him how everything was going. He assured me that everything was set up exactly how I wanted it. I had also asked David to share their location and to drive slowly or take a longer route so that I can get there 10 to 15 minutes before them. I realized David hadn't shared the location, but it was fine. We got there and I just ran in to change into a suit. Then I went to the exact position and checked the camera angles. Everything was perfect. Then I waited for my girlfriend and her friends to arrive. The drive is 30 to 40 minutes from our apartment and they should have been there. I thought they went slightly overboard with stalling. I waited there for another 20 minutes. It had already been more than an hour since they left the apartment and I was getting worried, so I asked one of my friends to call David and sneakily ask how long it will take them. They called him 2 to 3 times, but no answer. Then they called Leah 2 to 3 times. No answer. I assumed the worst. I called David and Leah as well. Still no answer. Finally, I decided to call Elise. First call, she didn't answer. My heart was racing at this point. As soon as I called her again, Leah answered instead. I was panicking and asked her if everything was all right and why nobody was answering the phone. She went silent for 2 seconds and then started yelling at me. She told me to never call Elise ever again and that I was dead to her. That I was a horrible human being for doing that to her. That she doesn't want to see my face or talk to me ever again. I was confused, but before I could say anything she hung up. I was so confused and started crying and my friends had to console me. Soon after that, I got a text from Leah that she'll be coming over later with David to get Elise's stuff and that Elise doesn't even want to step into the apartment, even if I'm not there. I immediately called her parents to ask what was going on. They knew about the proposal and we were supposed to go to their home for lunch after the proposal. They had no clue what was going on and told me that they'll call her and ask. I got a call from them 10 minutes later saying that they called Elise and she told them that she can't talk right now and she'll call them later. They were also confused about all this. I was devastated and I didn't know what to do. My friends took me back to my apartment and we hung out. David and Leah came over in the evening to take Elise's stuff. My friends and I tried to talk to them but they didn't say anything. They just asked me where Elise's stuff was and just took some of it and said they'll be back for the rest. They also reiterated that if I tried contacting Elise again, I'll be reported for harassment. At that moment I just wanted to cry because just the thought of me harassing my girlfriend was overwhelming. After they left, my friends told me that they think I shouldn't be alone right now and they were staying the night, and won't take no for an answer. We stayed up and talked till 4 a.m. last night and then everyone went to bed. I wasn't able to sleep and I've been just thinking about every potential reason for Elise's behavior, but I don't have any answers. The only scenario I can think of is that Elise was cheating on me and somehow she realized I was going to propose and she freaked out and told her friends that she can't do this because I cheated on her. This still doesn't make sense, but it's the closest thing to an explanation I have right now. I know it's a horrible thing to think about. Today was supposed to be the first day of our engaged life together. Hopefully, I'll be able to get some answers from her parents if they talk to her. ETA, been up all night and was going through the comments. I cannot reply to every comment and message, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the supportive comments and messages. I don't have any updates yet, but I wanted to add some details for the people speculating. For the people worried about Elise's safety, her parents called her yesterday and talked to her briefly. She just said that she's not feeling good right now and she'll call them in a few days to talk. So apparently she's safe. I've told them to call me as soon as they hear back from her. Also, David is gay, so I don't think there's anything going on romantically between them. For the people saying that I did something wrong, cheat, or physically hurt her, I don't know what to say to you. If I did that, then I wouldn't be losing all my sleep looking for answers. Some people suggested that I don't give Elise's stuff to Leah and David, and I think it's a good idea. I'll tell her parents that if they want her stuff, they can either tell Elise to get it or come get it themselves. When Leah and David came to get some of her stuff, they just took some clothes and shoes. There are many people who are confused about the timeline. All of this happened 2 days ago on Saturday, not last week. I'll also try to contact Elise. I'll write down everything I can think of and send her an email as I'm blocked on everything else. Also, one of my friends knew Leah before we met, they were colleagues at their old job and they set us up, so I've asked him to try to find out what's going on from their mutual friend group. What's the worst prank you pulled on your spouse? I bought her a prank engagement ring. Recently my girlfriend has been giving a million hints that she wanted me to propose to her by sending me wedding TikToks and proposal ideas. Her entire For You page is obsessed with it. Since we've been dating for 11 years, I thought a prank with a fake engagement ring would be perfect. She was desperate enough for the prank to work. I went to Soulmate Charms and bought a hematite ring. It's not traditionally used for pranks, but the hematite ring is a ring that breaks from bad energy, so I decided I'd give her a crappy proposal. We went to McDonald's and we ate inside, and I just got on one knee in front of everyone after I ate my 20th chicken nugget. She asked me if I was serious and I said yeah. She started crying tears of joy and immediately said yes. At this point I started to feel guilty a little, but I had to see it through. She put on the ring and within 2 weeks she called me crying. I immediately thought it was her trying to tell me the ring broke. But she admitted to me she slept with her brother by accident. What did the weird kid in your school do that you'll never forget? I studied geology, so we went on a lot of field trips. One time, we went to Spain and I noticed this rather strange girl had a tally chart in the back of her notebook. Now, this girl was odd. She wore all black clothes that were clearly not washed very well. She had bright ginger hair and would wear huge spiky plastic jewelry that was usually bright orange. Like big spiky plastic necklaces or bracelets. She would pick her nose aggressively in class, kind of girl. One day we had a day off to relax and do what we wanted, so everyone agreed we would go to Madrid for the day, so we all get on a big coach and set off. The drive is like 2 hours. 30 minutes in, she starts mumbling to herself about needing the toilet, everyone around her going quiet as she became more agitated. Eventually, she jumped up and waddled down the aisle to ask the driver to stop. After a bit of arguing and Spanish shouting from the driver, we pull over. The bus doors open, she walks back up the aisle and gets off using the door halfway down the bus. She takes 3 steps away from the door and starts digging a hole like a freaking badger in heat. Now at this point, I think deep down I knew what was about to happen. She's about to take a massive piss right here in front of everyone as the ultimate win or screw you to her classmates she clearly hated. Boy was I wrong. She finished digging her hole, it was quite impressive given how dry the ground was. She turned herself away from the bus, dropped her trousers, and took a squat over the hole. What is this? I thought. Maybe she's too shy for a stand-up piss. Nope. Out comes the most horrific dump from her pasty white bum. Like gallons of it, I've never seen so much. The hole she dug, whilst impressive, was not sufficient for the brown mass that spewed forth. She finished, wiped her butt with a small piece of tissue she had in her pocket, and got back on the bus with a maniacal grin. When we arrived, she turned to the bus driver and as casually as anything, says, "The bus ride was too long, I pissed myself a few times." At this point I'm losing my mind. What the fudge, lady? You stopped the bus so you could decimate the landscape? You couldn't have pissed then? You might as well have, I mean everyone saw your massive dump. I don't think a quick piss would have bothered anyone. Seriously. Anyway, 2 girls took pity and carted her off to a public toilet. The rest of us went to a few museums and had a great day, but it was hard to enjoy, to be quite honest. Madrid's Natural History Museum didn't have the same jovial atmosphere after watching a grown woman take a dump and piss herself. My partner asked me for an open relationship, so I slept with his brother. My boyfriend and I are both 26 years old and we've been together for about 2 years. We've never had any issues up until last month when he asked to open our relationship. He said that all men have the innate desire to sleep with as many women as they'd like. He said that women are attracted to men like him who are in their peak physical shape, and that he should take advantage of that, proceeding to say something about men wanting to spread their seed far and wide. I didn't see this coming at all, and I was appalled. By the time he was finished, he told me that I'm perfect wife material and the woman he wants to come home to, but that only rubs salt on the wound. However, I told him that this was fine with me and asked if he had anyone in particular in mind that had made him come to this decision. He was surprised by my reaction and told me how awesome I was for being so understanding. He then showed me his Tinder profile on an upcoming date. He knew that this arrangement only benefited him because I'm not into casual flings and wouldn't feel comfortable sleeping around. He said he knows that I wouldn't go looking for other guys because I'm too sweet and loyal. This really set me off. He was already looking for hookups before he even brought up the topic of an open relationship with me. And I knew from his Tinder profile that he would have cheated on me regardless of what my decision on the matter was. So I decided the best way to go about this was to do something that I knew would upset him. He has a 19-year-old brother and I called him the following day explaining the entire open relationship situation. His brother had proposed and asked if he'd be interested in having some fun with me. He admitted that he was willing, but felt a bit insecure because he was a virgin at the time, but I told him it was alright because he wouldn't be after the night was over. I kept my word and we slept together later that night. Afterwards I asked my boyfriend about his date and he said he had a great time. I told him that I met a guy who was younger than him who was a pretty cute, shy and inexperienced rugby player. He was curious enough to ask for a picture, which I gladly sent him. And when he saw the guy I was talking about was his brother, all hell broke loose. He had a complete meltdown and called me all sorts of slurs and profanities under the sun. I told him it's only natural for me to want someone like his younger brother and reminded him about our conversation where he talked about how women wanted men in peak physical form, which his brother clearly was. He is still blowing up my phone even after I left his house, and has sent me dozens of texts since I told him that our relationship was over. But he kept saying that he forgives me, even though I'm deeply effed up. And arranged. He suggested therapy, but claimed it might not help someone as evil as me. I believe what I did was justified after everything he had said and done, but maybe I went too far. Am I a hole? The unforgettable flight with Mr. Prankster. I've flown a lot in my time. Business, pleasure, you name it. But there's one flight I'll never forget, thanks to one passenger who turned the plane into a real-life comedy show. It was a red-eye flight from New York to London. I was hoping for a peaceful journey, a couple of movies, maybe some sleep. But then he boarded, Mr. Prankster. The moment he stepped onto the plane, he was cracking jokes, making the flight attendants laugh, and charming the passengers. But that was just the beginning. Once we were in the air, he started his pranks. It began with the classic "there's something on your shirt" trick, followed by a playful game of swapping meal orders. The energy of the entire plane shifted. There was laughter, chatter, and excitement, a far cry from the usual drone of a long flight. But the grand finale was still to come. Midway through the flight, Mr. Prankster disappeared into the bathroom. Minutes turned into a quarter of an hour, and passengers began to worry. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened, and out stepped Mr. Prankster, dressed as a flight attendant. The entire cabin erupted into laughter. Even the flight attendants couldn't help but join in, despite the breach of protocol. Mr. Prankster, or should I say, flight attendant Prankster, went around serving drinks, cracking jokes, and even giving the safety demonstration. Finally, when it was time to land, he took off his disguise, and with a mock bow, resumed his role as a passenger. That flight was the most enjoyable I've ever been on, all thanks to Mr. Prankster. It's not every day that you get a comedy show at 35,000 feet, and though I never saw him again, his spirit of fun and laughter remains etched in my memory, a reminder that my girlfriend drunk texted me and I've never felt so loved. My girlfriend of almost 2 years went out drinking with some friends last night. At some point, she texted me she loved me, and then about 5 minutes later she called me. I asked her what was up and she said I told all my friends that I had texted you I love you, but I don't remember if I did, so I wanted to tell you I love you, and honestly it was the cutest thing ever. She then started going on about how she was all mine and nobody else could have her. I don't know how I managed to get such an amazing girlfriend, but honestly I'm blessed. I beat the poop out of my sister and sent her to the hospital for what she did to my boyfriend. I've been dating my boyfriend Mark for about 5 years. He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. When we started dating he was a bit closed off and was afraid to initiate any form of intimacy. I at first thought it was because I was his first relationship and maybe he was nervous. 6 months into us dating he tells me that between the ages of 5 and 12 he was sexually assaulted and roped by his mother. His father left when he was around 4. It effed him up in the head for a while, and when it got out his mother was arrested and he and his 2 older sisters were put in the custody of their grandparents who they lived with ever since. He was placed in intensive therapy and still goes to this day. He's come a long way and has healed a lot, but he still has some days when he gets really depressed and cries. Because we've been dating for so long and have marriage in mind, he told my family and they welcomed him with love and support. Now for my sister Sally. I've suspected she's had a bit of a crush on him. She'll flirt sometimes here and there, but he never reciprocated and usually ignored her. I've talked to her about it so many times, but she didn't listen. I had gone out one Saturday afternoon with some friends to get some drinks and left Mark behind because he didn't feel like going. My sister had texted me prior to asking if she could borrow a few things from me. I said sure and to get it whenever. She went when I was out, unknowingly. When I came home I found my boyfriend on the ground crying his eyes out and my sister trying to calm him down. He was having a panic attack. It's never safe to touch him when he has an episode because he may act out violently due to his headspace. Her hands were all over him and he was trying to push her away. Her shirt was also on the ground and she was only in her bra. I tore her away and asked what the F she was doing. She said that she was trying on the sweatshirt when he walked in on her, freaked out and went into an episode. However, Mark through his tears said she tried to touch him. I asked my sister if it was true and she said no, but Mark again said she tried to touch him. We have cameras in the house and I pointed it out to my sister. Her face went white and I don't know what came over me, but I saw red. I can't remember much because I was so angry, but I beat the poop out of her. I can't even remember if I was the one who called 911 or her through her beat up state. I do remember kind of snapping out of it because Mark was still going through his episode and I could hear him cry louder and I had to help him through it. It's all a haze. I broke my sister's nose, gave her a black eye and bruised her ribs. She was in the hospital for a few days. Update, I beat the poop out of my sister and sent her to the hospital for what she did to my boyfriend. I don't have the recording anymore, it was too painful to keep let alone watch, but the tape showed Mark answering the door. Our cameras don't have sound recording, but Mark said that when he answered the door she told him that she was there to get my camera and sweatshirt. He said okay and let her in. He was watching the television so he went back to his show while she walked into our room. She called out to him for help and the camera showed Mark getting up to help her. I don't remember how long they were in there, but the tape showed Mark rush out of the room while holding his hands out as if trying to stop an attacker. My sister then emerged half naked while holding onto her shirt. Mark backed up into the kitchen still holding his hand out as she advanced towards him. Mark said he was telling her to put her shirt on and to leave, but she kept saying something along the lines of hey, it's okay. I just need some help, that's all, and you're a nice guy, just help me out a little, like a SLT. I think by that point he was declining into a panic attack as he started shaking. My sister took that opportunity to hug him. She said she did it to try and calm him down, but the tape showed her kind of grinding up on him. He pushed her away and fell to the ground crying and screaming. She then got down by him and was trying to wave her hands through his hair. Her other hand was also moving up towards his crotch. I remember from the tape seeing Mark flinch backwards and try to push her away. She always moved back closer to him. A few minutes later is when I got home and beat her to an inch of her life. I can't remember who called the police, but the police had showed up and my sister limped to the door while I was trying to help Mark calm down. I kind of remember them asking questions and trying to help Mark calm down. They thought he was going into shock, so they put a blanket over him and the paramedics came. My sister was quickly evaluated and then brought to the hospital. Mark and I stayed behind because by that point he had started to regain control again. I remember my parents showing up and asking what happened. I told them everything. My mom stayed with Mark and I while my dad drove to the hospital to see my sister. Mark and I pressed charges on my sister for emotional trauma and intimate battery, Class A1 felony where I'm from. My sister tried to sue me, a misdemeanor charge, but it fell through. With the evidence we had, my sister was sentenced to 60 days of incarceration with a bond of $5,000. No one paid. She also has to serve 200 hours of community service and her name was added to an intimacy offender registry. She can appeal to the courts to have it removed after 10 years. She was also placed under a restraining order. On top of that, my sister owes us $25,000. I got a small slap on the wrist and have to do 50 hours of community service. Nothing too bad. My sister was cut off from the entire family and still is. Mark regressed tremendously, to the point that he couldn't sleep in the same bed as me for months. He was required to go into even more extensive therapy. He's come a bit ways, but nowhere like he was before it happened. It will take a long time for him to heal. I consider myself bisexual, but I lean more towards men while Mark is %100 gay. He finds the female body disturbing, to the point that we have had to skip over full female nudity scenes in movies. My sister knew of this. When I asked her why she would do this, she said that she thought she could change his mind. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm also not sorry. My dumb girlfriend boasted about being SLT in a TV show. My parents were shocked and wanted me to leave her. A couple of months ago, my girlfriend of 3 months responded to an online ad for an upcoming TV show about Gen Z. The ad encouraged anyone between the ages of 18 to 25 to sign up for the show. If your submission was successful, which was the case with my girlfriend, you would be required to come to the studio and get interviewed on camera. That was it. Just you, the camera crew, and questions you had to answer about what it meant to be Gen Z. Luckily, my girlfriend was chosen and I can't help but feel proud, though I didn't know that her answer in the interview would give me the most shameful event of my life. The interview came and I was there to drop my girlfriend at the studio and then pick her up afterward, as I was not allowed to be there. After 5 hours, I was back behind the wheel with my girlfriend, who seemed relieved that she was no longer in front of the camera. I was curious to know what her experience was like and what kind of questions were asked. But my girlfriend said it was all a blur and that we would just have to wait to see when the show would eventually be aired. I was so excited to see my girlfriend on the TV and can't wait to see the show. It aired at the beginning of the month on one of the local streaming sites in my country. My girlfriend and I were unable to watch her episode together because we were physically too far apart, but I still made it an event by encouraging my mom and dad to watch it with me, which they were more than happy to do. I expected an entertaining and engaging discussion about all kinds of things affecting young people, and for the most part, I got exactly what I expected, which made me extremely proud of my girlfriend because the pressure was on her to be interesting and articulate, and she effing unalived it. That said, towards the end of the interview, my girlfriend was challenged to comment on random words that appeared on the screen. Words young people were using or redefining like riz, soos, drip, bag, and body count. One of the words was SLT, which prompted my girlfriend to state that she believed there was positive affirmation and power in the word SLT before she decided to go a step further by saying she proudly considered herself a SLT because she's had 20 partners and she enjoyed sleeping with all of them. She said that as a Gen Z, it's important to sexually explore before committing to marriage, and not that she needs to really get married because that is just a piece of paper. My parents' jaws dropped, and needless to say, eye contact became challenging for me with my mom and dad. I could sense the sudden tension in the room as my girlfriend unashamedly embraced her SLT self. The episode was less than 13 minutes long, but it ended up feeling a lot longer due to how uncomfortable it was to watch with my parents. My mom immediately told me to break up with her. Today I effed up by keeping my son's fish alive. For context, I am a 26-year-old single parent to a way too smart for me 5-year-old boy. I mean it. This kid makes me feel like a effing idiot, and this story reaffirms that. Also, he has the biggest heart. He is the most empathetic kid I have ever met. He once cried that he often inchworm he named Willie and still brings him up 6 months later. This mess up is about at 2.5 months in the making, truthfully. I just happened to realize the mess up today. Anyways, kid's been wanting a dog. Specifically, an old English sheepdog. I don't just yet. I'd prefer we own the house we're in before getting a dog, so we compromised and got fish. They were cool colors, they glowed in the dark, they were low maintenance, and best of all, they were cheap. We got 3 fish, a pink one named Stella, a yellow one named Sunny, and an orange one named Klaus. Obviously, we verified that the tank was the correct size for the 3 fish and declined the offer for 2 more at the store. Kiddo did great feeding them a pinch of food once a day and all was good. Until a week later, Sunny was found floating upside down and looking like he was scalped or something. The whole top side of this fish's head was just gone. I don't know if maybe poor Sunny got too close to the filter and was scalped or what could have happened, but he went to fish heaven. My son was devastated. I let him know that Sunny was a great fish and that he loved him for the time he took care of him, and he was a great fish owner. We take him down to the river we live on and laid him to rest. Flash forward to the next week-ish. Stella is dead. Not sure why, but it does not look like she went peacefully. Her eyes were all bulgy and looked like she was gasping for water when she went. Her mouth was like wide open. Obviously this isn't what happened because fish don't breath that way. But I digress. This leads to a second equally tragic and emotional farewell funeral for my son. At this point I'm considering bribing Klaus to stay alive because I don't know how many more fish funerals my son, and I, if I'm being honest, can deal with. However, Klaus seemed to be alive and kicking, or swimming, whatever, all was well. Then, I noticed one day that there was a little, tiny fish swimming around with Klaus. About 6 of them. I'm mystified and don't know what happened, kinda annoyed, but I googled whether this particular fish from the store we got them at can lay eggs and it says yes, so I guess we're now the proud owners of 6 to 8 new fish. Within a month of buying these fish, Klaus is now also dead. Also appears to be scalped somehow. He has no scales on the top of his head. At this point, also, we somehow have about a dozen of these little baby fish. Now we just go through the funeral nice and quick and deal with it. I assume now we're going to dump the tank and get rid of these little fish that I didn't want to begin with. Kiddo disagrees. It's his fish's babies and we need to care for them. Damn that empathetic heart he has. I'm reluctant, but I guess I don't see a problem in keeping them. I'm pretty annoyed Klaus got knocked up and died shortly after giving birth to these fish. Like what an asshole? But it is what it is. My son continues to feed these fish every day and keeps up with his responsibility. It's now 2 months down the road and I noticed tonight that the fish haven't gotten any bigger and there are a ton more baby fish in this tank. Coincidentally, we have also been getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. I mean, we are covered. We wake up with more bites every day. Yep, I know you know where this is going. If you don't, you're as dumb as me. I called my son's dad to complain about the ridiculous amount of babies this asshole fish left for me to deal with. He happens to not be a total effing idiot and let me know that mosquitoes mate and breed in sitting water and I should probably check it out. Another quick Google search pops up all these ugly effers we've been feeding for 2 months now. Turns out, Klaus didn't have babies. A mosquito got into the tank and had babies in Klaus's home. I shit-talked Klaus for 2 months because he or she had babies and died. R.I.P. Klaus. I also allowed my son to feed the same mosquitoes that were eating the shit out of us. I hosted a giant effing mosquito orgy breeding party in my 5-year-old's room for nearly 2 months. The only thing I don't understand is that we have a filter on our tank so it wasn't sitting water. It doesn't even matter at this point. I am a defeated person. The mosquitoes have driven me to a point of paranoia I don't even want to discuss, but I will. I have stayed up at night in a completely dark house, sitting in my bathroom with a flashlight focused on a wall just to smash these bastards with a fly swatter for a week now. I have walked around with a fly swatter in my belt loop to be prepared for these assholes. I see them in the corner of my eye when they aren't there. The buzzing is the theme songs of my nightmares. Just to find out today I was torturing my own self. I was the cause of my own undoing. Today, I effed up. The last 70 days of my life, I effed up. Tonight, I yeeted a fish tank full of not Klaus's baby fish over the back balcony into the yard and we'll deal with it tomorrow. We should have just gotten the effing dog.
What's the smartest thing you can say to your kidnapper to make them uncomfortable? I was watching a true crime show the other day and this girl had been carjacked. The suspect had already ended the life of another young girl. He was trying to have this new girl drive him across the country. They eventually stopped at a hotel to sleep. While there, he threatened to end her life if she told the clerk, and didn't let her out of his sight. Police were already looking for the suspect. His wife was a cop. After confessing to ending the life of the first girl, he had stolen her firearm and ran off. The dude obviously knew he was wanted and was very paranoid. While in the hotel, he proceeded to tie the girl to the bed and fed her sleeping pills. So, she obviously knew what he was about to violate her. At this point, the girl's phone started making noise. It was just an alarm clock app on her phone. This guy was so paranoid, he started accusing her of being undercover, threatening to end her, and she explained it was just an alarm. After the girl calmed the kidnapper down, she explained that it was the alarm for her to take her STD medication. She said she had some kind of nasty STD and if she forgot to take the pill, she'd have pain and itching. This apparently worked. The guy didn't want to get an STD, so he didn't violate her, he just went to sleep. Eventually, this girl kind of befriended her kidnapper. I guess on a cross-country drive, you have to talk to each other at some point. Law enforcement was tracking the new vehicle, because the guy had tried to rob and shoot another person after they left the hotel, and that victim survived his wounds and managed to get a license plate number. When law enforcement tried to pull them over a few days later, the wanted man called 911, while they were being chased. Before he would agree to stop for the officers, he ensured that they knew that the girl had been carjacked, and that she had nothing to do with his crimes, and asked them not to shoot, as his victim was a really sweet girl, from a good family. He was taken peacefully. But because he spoke so highly of his victim, she was wrongly suspected and arrested as a co-conspirator. However, they quickly figured out she was just a victim and she was released.
What screams I'm a bad parent? Your own children being afraid of you. No child should be afraid of the person that looks after them nearly 24/7. Blaming your own mistakes and regrets on your kids. I don't know if this really screams it, but I absolutely hate when adults tell other adults their children's shameful secrets for no reason, even strangers. It tells me those children probably don't feel like they can trust their parents. Using your kid as therapy and then getting upset when they have issues regulating their emotions. Zero interest in the kid. Doesn't care what they do or what happens to them as long as they don't inconvenience them.
My wife bought our daughter a horse the day after I had just lost my job, so I threatened to divorce her. Let me just start off by saying that I love my family and I would do anything to support them, but I have always struggled with anger issues and I've always had issues at work with a-hole bosses. I'm not very good at managing my rage when I get pissed off, and I have come close to getting fired previously when I didn't handle conflict well at my place of work. Luckily I have managed to stay at my last job for almost 7 years, but we recently had gotten a new boss in our department, and he was a total dickhead. He was so condescending and didn't really understand anything about the department he was running, and eventually, I just lost my patience with him. He had gotten mad at me for missing a deadline for an important client and started berating me in front of the whole office. That's when I had enough and I got up and started yelling back to him in front of everyone. My boss doubled down, and we started screaming back and forth until I was eventually holding him by his collar and yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I understand that I lost my cool that day, but I had been managing my anger very well up until that point. If that man had never been hired by my company, this would have never happened. Unfortunately, I ended up being let go after that incident. I was extremely stressed out when I had to come home and tell my wife I had lost my job. My wife and I have been together for about 15 years, and it's not the first time she's seen me let go from a job because I flew off the handle on accident. We have a 16-year-old daughter together, and she is an excellent, well-behaved kid. She is on the lacrosse team at her school and a brilliant student who I am so proud of. About a year ago, one of her friends invited her to her barn, and she rode a horse for the first time and fell in love with it. She started volunteering at her friend's barn, and she and my wife started saving up to buy my daughter a horse. When I was still employed, I was supportive of their plan, and I always wanted to see my daughter happy. But as my daughter continued to talk about the barn and horse care, I started to realize that this was going to be an expensive endeavor. Before I lost my job, I knew we could handle the expenses of owning a horse since my daughter is our only child, and we have a lot of extra income after all of our bills are paid. My wife and daughter had finished putting the money together for the horse my daughter wanted around the same time I started having problems with my new boss. My wife and daughter had started looking at horses and falling in love with one in particular. They started arranging the sale with the horse's original owner and set up a date to bring her to a local barn where she would live under my daughter's care. I had never seen my daughter so happy and excited about anything, but I assumed that after I lost my job that my family would understand the new financial situation we would be in. I just thought that it would be clear as day that there was no way we could afford the horse after I had just lost my job. I assumed they knew that they would have to cancel the sale as soon as possible after I lost my job. Apparently, the sale was almost final, and the horse's travel arrangements were already in motion the week that I lost my job. But I still found it absolutely infuriating and ridiculous when I asked my wife if she had canceled the sale yet, and she said that they were still going through with it. I'll be honest when I say that I immediately started screaming at my wife, asking her how she could be such an idiot. I told her that my daughter was only a kid, so maybe she wasn't understanding, but my wife should have assumed that we wouldn't be able to take care of the horse after losing my income. My wife reminded me that the sale was already taking place before I had lost my job and that my daughter had a part-time job herself and would be contributing to the majority of the horse's expenses. My wife also insisted she could pick up an extra day at her own job if we really found ourselves struggling and that everything would be fine. I kept insisting to my wife that we didn't need this new burden over our heads and that she needed to find some way to get rid of this animal, because we could not afford it. My wife started to get very upset, and she said that she wouldn't take this away from our daughter just because I was a grown man who couldn't manage my emotions in any professional environment. This only made me more enraged, and I yelled at my wife for disrespecting me while I was already dealing with so much stress. I told her that if she ever spoke to me that way again, then I would leave her, and she would be responsible for destroying our entire family. My wife ended the conversation after this, and took my daughter out for dinner for a couple hours. When they got home, neither spoke to me, and my wife has been ignoring me since that day and sleeping on the couch. I have enough on my mind without her bullshit, and I'm just going to wait until she comes to her senses and speaks to me again. I have already made a post on Craigslist selling the new horse, and I'm not budging when it comes to getting rid of it. I think most people would agree with me when I say that there's no way I should be expected to pay for this thing while I look for a new job. I'm breaking up with my girl because I will die soon. I, 25, found out I have an illness that will unalive me. It'll take over my body and there's no cure. All the doctors can really do is prescribe stuff to make you comfortable. I have been in a relationship for 6 years now. This girl is the love of my life. I wanted to grow old with her, have 4 kids, and just live the perfect life. Always loyal and there for me. I've been in and out of the hospital many times over the course of our relationship. Mostly due to me racing dirt bikes. The most serious incident was a sharp point weapon wound, and I remember how scared and screamy she got even though I just needed stitches and got to go home the next day. This is not something where I can just go home the next day. I'm breaking up with her because she deserves to be happy with someone healthy who can give her the life she wants, and children. I'm scared she'll want to stay if I tell her what's going on. Part of me wants to lie and say I cheated so she hates me and leaves. We have lots of mutual friends. She'll find out eventually it was a lie and connect the dots on why I did it. But thinking about her crying from that lie breaks my heart. I don't want to see her lose hope while looking at me. I'd rather her be angry with me than see heartbreak in her. I just don't know what to do. Break up with her and tell her it's for her own good? Lie? Guess I also needed to vent because it just hit me this morning. I found out last week, but it just hit. I won't see 30. It's pancreatic cancer. Something like 95% of people diagnosed with it die in about 3 years. I think I'm going to make her hate me because she doesn't deserve to be insane over me. She barely made it when her parents died. I would be her last straw. I don't want her to be in a permanent grippy sock vacation. I'm breaking up with my girl because I will die soon. I decided I couldn't make this choice for her. So I took her to dinner at our favorite date spot, and had some amazing food and some drinks like always. The date continued like normal. We drove down to the beach and started walking till we got to our spot. She spoke first and said that she could tell there was something I wanted to say because I had that look on my face. She then made a joke about how it's too soon for us to get engaged, so if there's a ring in my pocket it better say there. This made it so much harder. She thought there was a ring in my pocket when I was about to tell her there never will be. Absolutely broke my heart. I told her she was right, there was something I wanted to say, and I told her everything. From how I found out what the diagnosis means to the prognosis. I made sure to not sugarcoat it or leave anything out. She deserved to know everything. For the next hour, it was a mixture of asking me if I was sure and how could this be possible and crying. She immediately said she was going to stay by me and I didn't need to worry about anything. I told her she needed to take a few days to think about it. I had already arranged for her best friend to be waiting in the other parking lot to take her to her house. I went home alone. Before anyone calls me names for not driving her home, I didn't want her to be alone after finding out, but I also didn't want her to see my cry. If she saw me tonight she'd get more scared. It would hit her that I'm terrified and she'd lose her crap. I got an update that she fell asleep because she cried so much. I sent an Uber Eats of her favorite dessert to her friend's house so it'll be there when she wakes up. As soon as I'm done typing this, I'm meeting up with my 3 closest friends to hang out. In the meantime I'll be drinking for 2, me and this idiot Cancer. Soldiers of Reddit, what are things they don't tell you about going to war? War isn't like Call of Duty. You don't just get points and then turn off the images in your mind. Growing up, all I wanted to do was go to the army. I was in ROTC and registered as soon as possible. All of my friends were going to the army too, specifically my best friend. I met my best friend in high school and the one thing we really bonded over was our love for the army. He was really dependable, and if I had to choose one person to go to war with, it would be him without a doubt. He was the person I could go to for anything, and he would always be able to help, whether that was offering words of advice or easing my worries. While in the army, my best friend and I did active duty and eventually we were deployed to Afghanistan. I don't like to speak much about what happened, but there was a raid during the night. My hearing went out from the nearby explosions and I had to carry my best friend as his leg had been blown off. Before we could reach safety, I turned to check on my best friend and his brain was bleeding out onto my clothes. I tried not to think about that night and I was sent to the trauma hospital. When I returned home, my parents cried for me and handed me an envelope. My best friend had left a lot of his possessions to me, along with a letter he left just in case he died first. The things he wrote are too personal to share online, but I can never get through that letter without crying. I can never read the last thing he wrote because those are the very last words he ever says to me. The thought of my best friend dying before me had never crossed my mind before. For some reason, I figured we would die together, instead of either of us having to live without the other. I had never prepared for any of this, and the reality of it hit me like a truck. All I could do was drown myself in food after that. I worked 12 hours a day as a mechanic and I came home to 2 whole meat lovers. Pizzas. In only a year I started weighing 250 pounds. I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. I couldn't walk up a simple flight of stairs without feeling like my heart was going to burst. I knew I was rotting inside, but eating distracted me from the PTSD of it all. I was on the verge of unaliving myself at this point because I had nothing to live for anymore. Before ending it all, I decided to read my best friend's letter one last time. But I was finally going to read his last words to me. Reading the entire letter made me regret not reading it ages ago. It might have saved me from all this pain and suffering because it seemed my best friend knew me better than I knew myself. He knew his death would destroy me, but as always, he was there to ease my worries. His final words to me were, "Make sure you don't lose yourself just because I'm not here anymore." In that moment, I vowed to make a real effort to change. If not for me, then for him. It was the least I could do. I got back to working out and did everything the army teaches you to lose weight. I was working out hard every day, but I couldn't kill my appetite. I wanted pastries, I wanted burgers, everything I couldn't have I wanted. Most nights I folded and destroyed my progress for the day. I lacked total self-control, and internally I felt like I was disappointing my best friend. If he were here, he wouldn't let me live like this. So, in order to not let all my hard work go to waste forever, I started taking appetite suppressants, Purity drops, along with tracking my calories through MyFitnessPal. The moment I started taking Purity drops, the urge to eat was going away almost immediately. I was able to hit my caloric goals on MyFitnessPal and kept myself in a deficit consistently. Sometimes, yeah, I folded again and ate a cinnamon roll when I shouldn't have, but I trusted the use of the Purity drops to suppress my appetite to get back on the saddle, and more importantly, I trusted myself. I was finally regaining the control I had on my life all over again. And along with feeling healthier, I felt happier. I could tell I was going to survive all the pain I was going through. It was like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. After 8 months passed, I lost 40 pounds and I couldn't be happier. It felt like my transformation was a way to honor my best friend, to make it possible for me to live for the both of us. I'm going to keep going and keep living until I see the man I once was in the mirror, and to make it possible for my best friend to be proud of me.
My nightmare brother-in-law slapped my 7-year-old child in the face because of running inside the house, so I called the cops on him and made his life miserable. I went to my sister-in-law's house to visit. We do not often go to their house as her husband doesn't have so much patience for children. He often yells at children and rants about them, but I never thought he could do something so horrible. 10 minutes after we arrived at their house, her husband slapped my 7-year-old ASD child across the face for running in the house. It wasn't overly hard, but I don't think that matters. Obviously, no running in the house is a set rule, but my child is on the spectrum and he needs frequent reminders. He skips runs when stimming. We hadn't even been at the house for 15 minutes at most when this happened, and my Sil's husband gave no warning or reminder. It happened so quickly that I didn't even have the chance to speak to my kid myself. He just walked up, slapped my son in the face, and yelled no running in the house. I immediately called the cops, and when they were at the house, I called my husband, who left work to come to be with us. My Sil's husband basically ran indoors with his tail between his legs the second my husband showed up. He gave him a good beating. My husband and I fought this for months, trying to get my Sil's husband charged, but ultimately the courthouse did nothing and neither did the cops. He got away with it. Since this happened, half of the family has stopped visiting my sister-in-law at all. This is a huge deal because my sister-in-law throws multiple family functions a year and family is huge to her, but they basically told her that since she stood by her husband and defended her husband on this, they wanted nothing to do with her. Guilty by association basically. We also had no contact with her and her husband. However, given the police report and it is on both sister-in-law and her husband's background reports while the investigation and court hearings were open, they were both fired from their jobs. Sister-in-law was a caseworker, and her husband was an assistant principal. My sister-in-law apparently started working retail at minimum wage, but her husband hasn't worked since because he's too depressed. Well, in the more recent months, we have been contacted by a few family members asking us to forgive and forget so that family life can pick up as usual. I outright refuse. I never told anyone they had to stop associating with these people. They did it on their own. But sister-in-law and her husband also have these people convinced that my son ran into this man's hand, that he didn't slap him at all, and that they lost their jobs and livelihood because I dramatically twisted the story. Now my mother-in-law is asking me to be the bigger person and apologize to sister-in-law and her husband for making them lose their jobs over a mistake so that the family functions can start again and the whole family can be together. She says she is getting too old to lose out on family time over a mistake. I basically told her tough poop and that sister-in-law and her husband are dead to me and I don't care who has a problem with it. But apparently, I'm what's keeping the family divided, because a good portion of the family says they will only forgive when I do. Am I the a-hole?
My ex left our family and is crawling back. My ex-girlfriend and I first got together 6 years ago, and from day one, we got on like two peas in a pod. Then after 2.5 years together, she fell pregnant. We had spoken about kids before and we both wanted a family, but not after just 2 years together. We spoke about it a lot, asked a few of our friends that already have kids and eventually decided to go for it. We also agreed that even if our relationship doesn't last, our child's well-being would always come first. Right before the lockdown in 2020, 3 weeks before the due date, we welcomed a perfect little girl and both of us were completely infatuated. It was a big adjustment, but our girl was an angel and we settled into parenthood rather quickly. Everything was going great at first, but 3 months later, it all changed. I was working late when I got a text from my mother to tell my mom girlfriend dropped our daughter off with her while she ran some errands, but 4 hours later, she hadn't returned and now she wasn't answering her phone. I called too, but she didn't answer me either. I got out of work, collected my daughter and went home to find a note from my girlfriend. She said that she couldn't handle the stress of lockdown and the baby and she just needed some time to clear her head. She also said not to call and that we would talk soon, but days turned to weeks with no contact from her or anyone else other than her sister, who visited her niece often but never mentioned my girlfriend. Fast forward 3 years and my ex-girlfriend is slowly starting to reach out again. It was slow at first, liking photos of our girl on Instagram and the odd comment, but that was it until last week. She sent me a text saying that she had seen how well our daughter and I are doing and asking if we could meet up. I was reluctant, but we agreed before our daughter was born that her well-being is what mattered the most, so reluctantly, I agreed to meet for a coffee so she can see our girl, but I'm having second thoughts. How do I forgive her for walking out on me and, more importantly, on our daughter?
My husband's ex-girlfriend outshined me on our wedding day. Last weekend, my husband and I got married. It was a great wedding, and I had a great time leading up to it. There's been only one thing that's left a sour taste in my mouth. Growing up, I always wanted a big princess wedding. I know some people see those as tacky and immature, but it was always my dream. As part of this, the theme for our wedding was ballroom, and I told everyone to wear the nicest things they owned and told the women in particular to try to outshine me. I even went as far as telling the married women to wear their wedding dresses. I didn't care about being outdressed. Instead, all I wanted was to fulfill the aesthetic in my head that I had for the wedding, which included everyone else looking nothing less than extravagant. Now on to my husband's friend. My husband has this friend I'll call Kate. Kate is my husband's childhood friend and first love. My husband comes from a small town, and the majority of his friends he's known since adolescence. In their senior year of high school, Kate and my husband got engaged, which is kinda normal where they're from, but called off the wedding and never went through with it. It was mutual. They felt they were growing up too fast and wanted to slow down. The calling off the wedding was the end of the relationship, but they stayed friends. I knew this information prior to getting with my husband and never had a problem or felt jealous because I'm friends with a few exes myself. In fact, 2 of them were invited to our wedding. One was my bridesmaid, I'm bisexual, and the other was invited as a guest along with his current girlfriend. I've never had a problem with Kate being my husband's ex, but I have had a problem with Kate as a person, as she's kind of bitchy and gossips like she's still in high school. A few examples of this are just a month into our relationship she confessed to my husband she still had some lingering feelings, to which he responded they had already tried that and it didn't work. If she brought it up again he would to cut her off out of respect for me. I wasn't that mad at the time, because I understood they had a long history and my relationship with him was just starting out, and she owed it to herself to see if there was anything still there before it was too late. However, after she was turned down, her attitude towards me changed to fake nice and started calling me things like cougar, or asking me how I expected to make a relationship work, as I want to be an anesthesiologist which would require long hours, or telling my husband's whole friend group how she doesn't like my loud personality. And when I confronted her about all of those things she would say, "Oh, it was just a joke," or "You're so loud I felt like you would just go off." There's more poop, but if I typed it all, I would never get to the point. Kate has her own husband I'll call Gerald. Kate and Gerald both make average in terms of finances as they are both teachers, Kate kindergarten and Gerald seniors. They got married last year. On a teacher's salary, Kate wasn't able to afford the most luxurious wedding dress out there, but I always had the impression she was happy with it. Kate does have another wedding dress from when she was going to marry my husband that her dad paid for, who has unfortunately passed now, which in terms of fanciness is a bit nicer, but obviously she didn't wear that dress to her own wedding. I was expecting Kate to wear the wedding dress she wore to her own wedding to our wedding, but when I looked and saw her, she had the wedding dress she was supposed to wear when she was getting married to my husband. When I saw her, I immediately went what the F, but decided to just drop it because I didn't want a conflict on our wedding day. My husband, however, was also confused on why she wore that one and asked her about it without me even having to tell him I was uncomfortable. She responded, "Well, your wife wanted such a big princess wedding, I thought I'd wear this one because it follows the theme more." Don't tell me she's upset about it. She's the one who said come in your nicest clothes and this is my nicest dress. I feel like I'm not allowed to be upset even though I am, and I know this is my fault, but the whole thing has really left a bad taste in my mouth. I would have never been okay with her wearing that one if I'd known she was going to, and I feel like she should have asked. I keep telling myself it's not that big of a deal, and during the daytime, when I'm distracted, I don't even think about it. But I've always been a night owl, and it makes me shitty every time I think about it before I fall asleep. So now I'm here complaining on Reddit like a loser. I feel pathetic.
Discovering my shocking skin condition. Do I have the right to blame my mother? I'm feeling a mix of shock and anger right now. Growing up, my childhood was difficult. My parents would constantly argue over insignificant things, speak poorly about each other behind their backs, and at times, it would even become physical. They grew up in environments where abuse was used as a form of discipline, and unfortunately, they transferred that abuse onto me and my siblings. I mistakenly believed it was normal, thinking that all parents treated their children this way. However, I now know that it wasn't right. My relationship with my parents has always been strained. We lack communication, and yet, they become upset when we don't reach out to them. They were especially strict with me because I'm autistic and had certain limitations while growing up. Recently, I noticed inflammation in my underarms, and I couldn't figure out the cause. I asked my mom for her thoughts, and she claimed that it was a result of me not washing properly and being lazy. However, I want to clarify that I wash myself twice daily, shower twice, and keep our home clean. When I returned home after dropping off my autistic sister at school, my mom commented on my odor. I explained to her that I had washed and applied deodorant, but she insisted that I was lazy. In her eyes, the other kids and teachers would notice and feel embarrassed for me. To be honest, my mom is aware of my condition, but she doesn't seem to care. She becomes upset when I don't clean myself to her standards. I suggested seeing a dermatologist to address my underarm issues, and she agreed at first but never followed through. I'm unsure why she didn't schedule the appointment. Furthermore, I explained that heat exacerbates the problem, while it doesn't occur during colder weather, yet my mom continues to dismiss me as lazy. Frustrated, I decided to conduct some research, and that's when I discovered that I have hidradenitis suppurativa. It's a skin condition that leads to unpleasant odor, itching, and irritated skin. I learned that it is not caused by poor hygiene but rather by hormonal imbalances, obesity, sweat, and other factors. Moreover, it primarily affects women, Hispanics, and smokers. I don't smoke, and I detest the smell of cigarettes. What's even more disheartening is that its exact cause is unknown, and there is currently no cure. Reflecting on my mom's experiences, I've come to realize that she also had this condition. However, she didn't face the same risk factors. Now, I harbor resentment towards my mom for calling me lazy in regards to my hygiene when I was already at a high risk. I have to live with this condition for the rest of my life, and it's something I can never forgive her for.
Am I the a-hole for telling my teacher the truth about my group project? This might have been one of the most petty things I've ever done, but I don't appreciate being treated like a doormat. I am a freshman in college, to be accurate, a community college. I know I don't go to some fancy prestigious college, but I am getting the education I can afford and I want to work as hard as I can in school. I have to do well in this current college if I ever hope to transfer out to a 4-year school, so I need my GPA to stay high. I am only 18 years old and I still live with my parents, but I work a part-time job to be able to pay for my tuition myself. Anyway, I had been having a pretty good semester so far. That was until I got assigned a group project in my biology class. I already have sort of a difficult time with my science classes, so I had already been taking extra time to study this class's material even though I was struggling with it. Our group got put together, and immediately I got the feeling that my 2 other group members weren't focused or taking the project very seriously. The first day we got the groups, we were supposed to be assigning group roles during class time, but the 2 other girls in my group were just talking and laughing about stuff not related to school. I tried to speak up a few times, and they would talk to me about the project for a minute without answering any of my questions before they went back to talking. So we had a couple weeks for the project, and even though I took the lead and put together all the main parts of the project, my group was not doing their part. All they had to do was insert some research into the PowerPoint I had already put together, and I was constantly sending them emails with resources and reminders of the due date, but nothing. The 2 girls wasted time during every class where we were given time to work on the project, and neither of them ever emailed me back about their portion of the work or submitted anything. They literally had done 0 work toward the project, and the closer the due date got, the more anxious I felt. I thought about just doing it all myself, but it would be so much work and I already basically did the entire project. The morning of the due date came, we were scheduled to present, and when I woke up I only had a couple hours before it was time for class. I checked the PowerPoint document as soon as I got up and saw it was still missing my partner's portions. I cried out of frustration, and hurried to just do both the parts myself so we could have a finished project to present later. This is where everything blew up. I didn't speak to my group before we presented, and I couldn't believe the girls just didn't care about our grade, apparently. We walked up together, and I didn't even make eye contact with them as I pulled up our presentation on the computer. I presented the first part, then I gestured for them to finish. As soon as the next girl went up, she started out by claiming that she had done this part. My jaw dropped. She presented the entire portion as if she had written it all, and when she was done she said, "Well, that's the part I did." I thought I couldn't get any angrier until the second girl went. She ended up following our other partner's lead when it came to saying she actually did any work. She was pointing at the slide she was reading and saying, "I did this one, and this one." I don't know if she was trying to lie for the teacher, but I was pissed off. I had enough, and when she got to the last slide and tried to claim that one is her work too, I spoke up and literally said, "No, you didn't, I wrote that one." Then, since I was already speaking up, I looked at my group and then at my professor and said, "I wrote every word in this project, you guys barely even know what it's on." They both gave me dirty looks, then looked at each other nervously. Both of the girls looked like fools. They claimed they wrote their own part of the project, but they couldn't pronounce half of the words that I had written. I looked over at our professor, and she was scribbling notes the entire time with a confused look on her face. After class, my two group members confronted me in the hall right outside of the classroom. They were upset and got in my face asking me who the hell I thought I was and why I had humiliated them like that. They said it was just a dumb project and that I should have helped them lie since it was easy for me to do the work anyway. I started getting frustrated at them. They were blocking my path and getting aggressive, so I raised my voice at them. I called them lazy and told them that they were both too dumb to fool our professor into thinking they had written even a word of that project. The next thing I knew, the three of us were all in a screaming match right there in the hall. Things got so heated that we got my professor's attention, and she came out to see what was going on. As soon as she walked up, she said, "Let me end this right here," then pointed at my group members and said, "Do you think I started teaching yesterday? 0, 0, for both of you." She turned to me and thanked me for my hard work, and said I would be given full credit and that she was happy with my work. Then she dismissed me as she started explaining to the two girls how if they plagiarized again, they'll be expelled.
My fiancée left after 3 years. It's been 3 years since I met the love of my life. She was captivating, with her fiery red hair and a smile that could melt hearts. We were like magnets, drawn to each other with an intensity that shook us both to the core. We laughed, we cried, and we shared everything. We were inseparable. But then, one sunny Sunday afternoon, I came home to an empty apartment. I called out for my fiancée, but there was no response. Panic coursed through my veins as I searched every room, desperately hoping that she was just playing a prank on me. But she was gone. Without a single word. My mind raced with questions. How could she just leave after 3 years of love and commitment? What could have possibly gone wrong? I felt like a fool who had been blindly walking through a minefield, unaware of the explosion that was about to tear my heart apart. Days turned into weeks, and the pain only grew stronger. I trudged through my daily routine with a broken spirit, barely functioning in a daze of confusion and heartache. Work became my escape, a temporary relief from the overwhelming emptiness that engulfed me. As the days turned into months, I immersed myself in my job. It became my sanctuary, the one place where I could find solace amidst the chaos of my shattered love life. The long hours and relentless dedication offered a temporary distraction, but deep down, I knew it was just a band-aid on a festering wound. One night, after a grueling day at work, I found myself drowning my sorrows at a local bar. The dimly lit room was filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, but I felt like an outsider, disconnected from the world around me. I stared into the bottom of my glass, searching for answers that seemed to slip further away with every sip. And then, she walked in. My heart skipped a beat as I caught a glimpse of her familiar face. It was my fiancée, the one who had left without a trace. Emotions I thought I had buried surged to the surface, and I was torn between confronting her or fleeing from the pain once again. As our eyes locked, time stood still. We stood motionless, surrounded by the noise of the bar, yet lost in our own world. I saw a mixture of regret and longing in her eyes, mirroring the storm of emotions raging inside of me. Without uttering a word, she turned and walked out of the bar, leaving me with a million unanswered questions and a heartache that intensified with each step she took. In that moment, I realized that some wounds never truly heal. So, I decided to take a leap of faith and leave my job, determined to find the answers that would bring closure to this chapter of my life. The journey ahead is uncertain, but I refuse to let this pain define me. I'm ready to face the road ahead, no matter how treacherous it may be. I'm ready to uncover the truth and get the closure that I need. I'm ready to find out why my fiancée left after 3 years of love and commitment. What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? Not so much a secret someone shared with me, but comments someone has made about a particular murder case in the Midwest US. All I'm going to say is that a family member very close to me has consistently every so often made comments about a particular murder that happened in the region they grew up. The murderers were caught, but I believe little to no remains were found, and through the investigation it was discovered that the victims were fed to pigs. My family members' comments have always been vague and don't incriminate them in any way or add new information. Yet it has always unsettled me, not just because of the consistently and way in which they do it, but the hushed tone they say it in that gives me the impression they could know more than they lead on, be it first-hand or second-hand info. To be fair, rumors spread like weeds in rural America. Doesn't help that at the time of the murders this relative of mine worked at a slaughterhouse run by another family member, another interesting character, an ex-biker, and always enjoys everyone's discomfort when they go into gory detail about the process of dispatching various animals including pigs. Usually at the dinner table. Anyway, this person has always been into true crime, and I don't think many murders happen in the region they grew up. Which could explain their fascination. I just can't help but shake the feeling they know something and sort of want to share it someday. Maybe I'll prod next time I see them.
What's the trashiest wedding you've been to? Wedding was in a suburban driveway. The maid of honor stole the bouquet from someone's garden and the best man proudly announced he had shoplifted the rings. The groom wore a button-down shirt that said F off in fancy lettering. The bride stopped in the middle of the vows to tell her mother to get that effing kid out of here. It was her second kid by the previous bloke. When it was over, we apologized to the celebrant. He said he'd seen worse. Camel print wedding dress that was borderline see-through. Walked down the aisle to the Scooby-Doo theme. No, nobody knows why they chose that song, including the couple themselves. They divorced a few months later after they both stopped cleaning the house in an act of defiance against one another.
What's a modern-day scam that's become normalized and we don't realize it's a scam anymore? Health insurance plans that charge $500 through $1,000 a month just to be insured. Then don't start covering your bills until you've paid another $2,000 to $10,000 out of pocket. And even then will still make you pay a $45 copay. And on the provider end, your plan is delaying payment on claims, so your $500 through $1,000 a month premium is just going into the pocket of the executives and shareholders instead of healthcare providers. And behavioral health claims get most of the abuse. Just in case you were wondering why so many licensed psychotherapists opt out of accepting insurance.
Trying a harmless prank? You gave me toilet nightmares for a lifetime. I must have been about 7, old enough to visit the bathroom independently, but still rather new to the freedom of walking around somewhere that wasn't my neighborhood or the woods alone. I went into the bathroom at a restaurant called the River Inn, and there were 3 stalls, 1 handicapped, and 2 regular. All but one of the stalls, a regular one, were taken. I distinctly remember looking under the doors for feet, because I was a little kid, and for whatever reason preferred the handicapped stall. I saw no feet, but the doors were locked. Whatever, I went into the one open stall, and as I walk in there is a rat in the corner that was bleeding out. Blood was everywhere. But's worse is that when I look in the toilet there was a huge effing squid. I couldn't stand this environment, so I tried throwing up all of it. Like, the body had to be at least a foot long, plus tentacles, coiled around the inside of the toilet bowl. It totally filled the available space. Cloudy dead squid eyes, gazing up at me from the pooper. I afterwards ran out of the bathroom in horror, told nobody, and held my pee for the 45 minutes drive home. What the F was that squid doing there? All I can surmise is it was a line-cook prank, in an area that ubiquitously has squid on the menu. But still, what the F? 25 years later, that terror toilet squid still haunts me with its milky eyes staring into my soul as I threw up onto it. Now every time I go into a public stall, or for that matter any bathroom, I have to make sure that there is no squid. I even have dreams of it jumping from that toilet onto my face and eating me like an alien would.
My boyfriend's mom slapped me after his sister's wedding, and now the family wants us to break up. My boyfriend and I went to his sister's wedding over the weekend, and now his parents want us to break up. My boyfriend James is British, and I'm not, so maybe it was a cultural thing, but the weekend was uncomfortable. On the drive home, James kept making jokes about meeting my family and passing the dad test, so I replied, well, I just went through the Balmoral test, so you'll be fine. Did I pass? James started to squirm in his seat and said that although it wasn't a big deal, I hadn't made the best first impression on his family. I woke up too early and dressed for breakfast. I didn't spend enough time with his mom and sisters. I didn't eat enough, and I bought cheap wine from the supermarket. I respect their right to feel whatever they wish towards me, but it doesn't feel fair. I'm trying to figure out why James felt the need to list my failings. It felt like he was fishing for an apology from me. So I decided to tell him what their faux pas had been. I told him that they had badgered me about my eating habits, forced me to play with his little cousins, and made inappropriate comments about my culture like go on, dance señorita, or is that not written in your visa? And they so got paralytically drunk at the wedding, that his mum pieced herself, his sister threw up over the wedding cake, and uncle took a shotgun and started to shoot at bushes that he thought were birds. His dad even passed out fully clothed in their pool and had to be fished out by catering staff. James said I was cruel to his family and that I should have kept my comments to myself, and accused me of lying. He said he was just trying to make the point that I should loosen up when I next see his family, and that he was suggesting that there was something wrong with me, but I had basically called his family uncouth thugs. I stopped the car, suddenly furious that he had turned this around and accused me of lying. I got out of the car and started to walk up the road. Then, a large Land Rover pulled up next to me and a familiar voice asked why I was running from their son. I slowly turned and saw his mother poking her beaky little face out of the window. I told her that it was none of her business and that I thought they were rude, so she slowly got out of the car, raised her hand, and smacked me across the face. She didn't say another word and instead sped off, leaving James and I stunned. I bet she found out that while I was in a drunken rage, I slept with James's brother and he hasn't stopped texting me since.
My best friend Dr. Ged me and it ended up putting me in the psych ward, so I got him arrested. My best friend Eric has always been kind of on the weird side, but I could have never guessed how truly evil he was. We had been friends since we were 13 and this all happened when I was 17 and he was 18. He had confided in me early in our friendship that he had been diagnosed as a sociopath when he was a child, but I was nearly still a kid myself, and I guess I just didn't really understand what that even was. When I look back, I wish that I had opened up about this to anyone else so they could have warned me about the implications of being best friends with a diagnosed sociopath. I learned as I aged that it meant he had dangerous outbursts, and that he didn't feel guilt the same as a normal person. I definitely saw Eric's condition in his behavior. He was a really mean kid and teenager. He liked to torture animals, such as throwing rocks and cats and birds. Once we were even walking home from school and found a bird with a broken wing on the sidewalk in front of us, and before I could say anything, he stomped on it and unalived it. It was horrifying to see, and the memory still disturbs me to this day. Anyway, as we grew up and went through high school, I made new friends, and Eric remained antisocial with me and his only friend. Even though he was getting stranger and made me more uncomfortable with the longer remaining friends, I didn't want to just leave him alone in life, so I stayed by his side. Of course, towards the end of high school, we started to drift apart more than ever. I saw Eric less and less, and he would get upset with me for forgetting about him and thinking I was better than him because I wasn't effed up like him. I tried to tell him I was just busy with sports and college stuff, but the truth is I was happier the less I saw him. Anyway, this all happened the very last time we ever hung out. I never thought someone I once called my best friend could do something evil to me. Anyway, we were hanging out on some train tracks near our favorite park, and things were already awkward since we weren't seeing each other regularly and Eric seemed mad about it. Eric had brought us some WD to smoke, which was normal and something we had done together before. We smoked like normal, but as soon as I finished taking my own hit out, Eric started laughing. It all happened so fast and freakishly, he was laughing like some evil villain, and I realized that this WD was making me feel really strange. I barely had time to react before my mind entered this eerie state where I did not feel I was inside my body anymore. It sounds crazy, but for the next hour, I felt like I wasn't a human anymore. Instead, I was a piece of gravel underneath the train tracks. It felt like a horror movie, and I felt every rumble and heard all the loud sounds of the train passing over me. It was the most vulnerable, scary experience I've ever lived through. When I came to, Eric was gone, and it was dark. He had dragged me onto the train tracks and left me there. I had a panic attack when I woke up. I didn't understand what had happened to me, and I realized if I hadn't woken up in time, I could have been unalived by a train since the tracks were active. I went home and tried to keep my new paranoia a secret from my family, but after I was crying and shaking in my room for 2 days straight without being able to go to school, they took me to the hospital. I failed the psych evaluation, and I ended up needing to stay in the psych ward for 2 weeks before they released me. I learned through my therapy in the hospital that Eric had most likely Dr. Ged me with salvia, and what I experienced was called derealization. It took me a long time to mentally recover after leaving the hospital, and the experience left me with so much new anxiety and paranoia. While I was inpatient, my parents had gone to the cops with my story and copies of my hospital intake paperwork. The police believed my parents, and since Eric was already 18, they arrested him for infliction of bodily harm. I still don't know if I feel strong enough to sit in front of him and testify against him. Just the idea of seeing him makes me want to cry out of fear. I'm traumatized for the rest of my life, and this incident has completely derailed all the plans I had for myself. I missed too much schoolwork while in the hospital, and now I can't graduate on time. He ruined everything for me. I just wish I could go back and end my friendship with that freak before he had a chance to leave my life in pieces like this. Minimum wage workers. What is something you aren't paid enough to care about? I worked at a hardware store in the garden center making close to minimum wage. We often loaded heavy bags of mulch and dirt for customers in their trucks, beds and whatnot. We were told that we were not allowed to take tips from customers. So being the good boy that I was, I turned down a couple tips until one day I loaded up a full customer pickup bed and he handed me a $20. I told him I can't take that, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do they really pay you so much you don't need it?" I stopped being an idiot that day. Why the hell I let someone pay me so little and tell me I'm not allowed to make more and I listened is just embarrassing now. If the item doesn't have a price, I'll let the customer just name it if they're nice. We're supposed to have someone check the price, but that usually takes a long time as everyone's busy. I save that for a-holes. They get to pay full price, and wait for me to check the price. I worked at an online diaper bag company, and if a bag was returned, I was supposed to find out if it was a defect or the customer's fault to decide how to issue a replacement. When a frantic hormonal new mom would call me getting ready to rant and put her foot down, I would always interrupt their story and just ask for their address and what type of bag they wanted, and ship it for free. No way am I being paid enough to get in that argument. I don't care if they were carrying large bricks in the bag. Take a new one. I worked at a deli and had the power to override the price per pound anytime I felt like it. So if a customer was upset or if they had a cool shirt or something, I'd give them half off. My manager was a douche. I didn't really care. My wife is hiding a secret life from me. Yesterday, I discovered my wife's secret Instagram account. Secret for me, public knowledge for almost everyone else. So yesterday, my sister visited me at home as I needed help with some work. As we took a coffee break, my sister becomes slightly serious and says to me, "You know, I'm starting to find it kinda weird that your wife doesn't have any pictures with you on her Instagram. Am I wrong?" Now to my knowledge until then, my wife's only Instagram account has like 10-ish pics, and a little above 100 followers. I answer that she barely uses the app/site whatever and there is no point in having me plastered around for such a small family and close friends account. It was that moment when my sister's face went Hollywood-like surprised as she said, "No man, I'm talking about her famous account, I don't see you in literally any pic there." My brain cannot comprehend anything as I look at her and just ask about what goddamned account she talks about and what in the heck is even this. I don't think any Academy Awards winners could recreate the what the hell look on both me and my sister's faces during this conversation. She goes to her following list and shows me an account that indeed had my wife's face as a profile picture and a very shortened version of her normal Instagram's username. An account I've never seen before. She clicks it and that's when my life goes full 2020. An account of my wife with more than 2.000 posts, and more than 250k followers. My mind can't comprehend what I'm seeing. I immediately access my account and try to visit her profile for my login. Page not existing, I'm blocked by my own wife. I've been married to this woman for 18 years, we have 2 daughters. My mind is blank, I can't have any reaction whatsoever. We scroll and scroll, from those posts, about half of them are sexy pics of her either at the beach, pool clubs, or backyard pools at some of her friends that I know and get along very well with personally, you name it. Wearing thongs, G-strings, thong swimsuits, topless covering with her hands, all the stuff you can see on an account like this. She is with our daughters in some of the pictures, the normal pictures and not the ones where she shows her body off, but my soul is sinking in as I realize that even my daughters know about this account and those pictures. Even in her clothed pictures, she is braless most of the time, and is not shy in showing that for the picture. I admit I am a slightly prude person in public. I don't enjoy being too much half naked at the beach, and standing in the sun. But man, during almost 20 years of relationship, my lack of beach-going passion was summed in probably 15 minutes of discussion in total. It was a non-subject. I've never made a big deal, or a deal whatsoever, about her going to the beach if and when she wants to, or showing her body, or anything else, ever in my life. That subject doesn't exist. With me, I don't think she ever went braless for example. Always wearing a good bra, a sports bra, you name it. In our rare outings together at the beach, she was in shorts or normal swimsuits. The only times when she could take these pictures was when I was away from the city/country for work for a few days/weeks, as I don't remember her going to random beaches, pools, her friends etc. only with our daughters or alone when I was at home. I try to see if I'm really the biggest loser on this planet. I try to verify which of our close friends, my or her coworkers and everyone else in our circles know about this account. In our age group, no one, well almost no one as we can see, acts like an Instagram star, so we have small accounts with a bunch of pics and small number of followers/following so it was easy to search. None of my coworkers or the men in my family have her at follow, but I check some of her coworkers, guys and girls, and those friends from her girl group or whatever that I don't really hang around much with, and they do have her famous account at follow, they know about this. We're 100% sure my sister shouldn't have known about this account and shouldn't have followed her either. That, or she knew that my sister followed and just tried everything to be successful at hiding from me and the people close to me basically in plain sight. I scrolled through the last picture, and they are from early 2017, so it's more than 3 years of this lie. Basically, I can say that I'm not even looking for relationship advices per se, because it will probably take me a very long time to even fully comprehend the situation and try to open the subject. I'm more about looking for support in order to cope with the thought that my wife considers me less important than 250k subscribers and whoever knows how many others saw her like in all these pictures, in real life, without me having a clue. Since yesterday, I've been in a full-blown chat conference with my sis, parents and all those who didn't know about this farce thinking about what I should do, while forcing myself in a ridiculous way to act completely oblivious next to my wife and the kids. What are the craziest objects that you've seen TSA workers remove from someone's bag to be confiscated? A guy tried to take a big bottle of shampoo in his carry-on. The TSA guy told him to either throw it away or exit the line and check his luggage. The guy went on about how expensive the shampoo was and how he'd miss his flight if he exited. The TSA guy didn't care. The guy then said, "Well, at least keep it so that somebody gets some use out of it." TSA guy said, "Sorry, he couldn't do it." Another time, a woman in front of me got busted with several jars of jam. The TSA guy told her the same thing the other TSA agent told the shampoo guy. Either pitch it or else exit the line and check it in. But you don't understand. It's jam. It's prize-winning jam. Open up a jar and take a taste. The TSA guy declined to eat the jam. The woman, now in tears, threw away her prize-winning jam. Not a confiscation, but while checking into Australia, some of us were chosen to have our luggage searched. The guy in front of me had a suitcase full of porn. The Australian Border Force officers didn't bat an eye, didn't smirk, didn't say a word, just rifled through his suitcase looking for who knows what. The passenger turned 9 shades of red. After their search, they packed it all back up and returned it to him. This last one/best one I remember was a couple decades ago pre-TSA, but a couple in front of me were being searched by a very young customs agent. He was going through the wife's suitcase and pulled out an applicator tampon and held it up in the air. "Aha, what's this?" Another customs agent looking on immediately turned and stepped away. The husband yelled over to his wife, "Marge, get over here and declare your Kotex before we end up in prison." By now, the young guy realized his mistake and, now horrified, ushered them through as fast as humanly possible.
My J-pop boyfriend decided to leave me because I wasn't pretty enough for his image, so I moved to America and made him regret dumping me. High schoolers used to harass me and tell me they wanted to get me pregnant behind my middle school. I was often called pretty because I was skinny, had clear skin, long hair and fit every beauty standard. I was even able to get a wavy-haired Japanese boyfriend who worshipped me, and called himself lucky because I chose to tickle his prostate. I was living the dream, being the center of attention and getting treated perfectly, but I never realized that I peaked in high school. After graduation, I left Japan and went to study in America since it has always been my dream. I never imagined that this would be the beginning of my downfall. Once I moved into the dorms, my rose-tinted glasses fell off, and I started to see just how terrible McDonald's people live. I never had any privacy to myself, and I can't count how many times I had to go to the bathroom to fart because I didn't want my roommate to hear. I had to wear nose pinchers and risk being called insane because of how bad the air around campus smelled. And my neighbors were always going to town with some randos, so I blasted Baby Shark to help with the romantic mood. My boyfriend got to hear about all my complaints because everyone around me thought this was normal. He'd tell me to move back because he missed me, and though it was tempting, I had already paid the tuition, so there was no turning back now. But what really made me decide never to go back to Japan was losing my clear skin. Suddenly, I had blackheads, ugly pimples, and red, dry patches. There were so many pimples that I joked about starting a pimple popping account to pay for tuition. People even laughed when they saw me. Even the supposedly nice sorority girls suggested I use stars pimple patches, but they didn't help at all. I thought if Americans mocked me for my looks, I'd definitely be bullied even worse in Japan. It was tough accepting how much I'd changed. Now, I started avoiding FaceTime calls with my boyfriend because I didn't want him to see my awful, disgusting skin. He'd get upset and say he missed seeing my beautiful face, so I couldn't deny it over the phone too. I would just silently cry to myself about it whenever he said that. I wondered what I did to deserve this, but then I noticed a pattern. All the sorority girls had thick layers of makeup hiding dots, which were obviously pimples, and my roommate spent hours on her skincare routine. Despite that, her skin still looked crusty and full of red acne. She couldn't recommend any good skincare brand because her acne resisted all treatments. With no help from her, I went online to figure out what caused my acne and how to fix it. Turns out, the new food, us makeup, or air quality could have caused my breakouts. I freaked out because that meant I was doomed to live with acne forever. After another day of stares and comments about my acne, I called my boyfriend to vent. I was so frustrated I didn't notice he switched the call to FaceTime. It wasn't until he asked, "Who are you and why do you sound like my girlfriend?" that I realized. I was more confused by what he asked than I was freaked out when he saw my pimply face. Then he followed up his question by saying that I should take off my mask because he thought I was a skinwalker. I told him my skin was messed up because of something in the States, but I was still the same person he loved. He replied that his parents would never approve of a distasteful creature and hung up. I cried for hours, trying to call him back, but he had blocked me. My boyfriend's harsh words made me realize how cruel people could be if I stayed ugly, so I skipped classes the next day to find a solution for my ugly skin. I found some products that seemed promising because other people with skin worse than mine cleared their skin with it. So, I went out and bought them the next day. I happily applied the new products, thinking they'd solve everything, but nothing changed after 3 weeks. My roommate saw me freaking out and reminded me that she had warned me about the ineffective products. After that failed attempt, I went back to searching all over social media for a solution, though it wasn't until I was on YouTube that I found something promising. It was a video called "Is Water Ruining Your Skin?", where 2 dermatologists talked about the effects the water hardness in your house has on your skin. No matter what products you used or how long your routine was, if your water had toxic minerals like calcium carbonate, your skin wouldn't clear up and would be prone to breakouts. This explained why I broke out in America but not in Japan, since the water in Japan was very pure but the water in America was harsh and caused pimples. The dermatologists shared studies showing that high calcium carbonate in water can lead to eczema, sensitive skin, dryness and irritation. They recommended getting a water filter to remove the calcium carbonate as the best solution for dealing with hard water. The dermatologists recommended a Q-Refi water filter, saying it was clinically proven to improve the skin in 2 weeks. They also suggested using a clean towel and pillowcase to protect against bacteria. While buying the Q-Refi water filter, I filled out the water report on their website and found out my college's water had chemicals like arsenic and dibromochloromethane. None of those words are in the Bible. Finding out my water had arsenic and dibromochloromethane, which can cause skin cancer and brain damage, pushed me to get the Q-Refi filter, towel and pillowcase. After a week of using the Q-Refi filter, my skin began to improve. The pimples that had plagued me for so long started to disappear, and the dryness that made me feel self-conscious was significantly reduced. Each day, I noticed more clear patches on my face, and I would stare at myself in the mirror to admire the clear parts of my skin because I missed it so much. I looked so good my coochie clenched. I was feeling more confident in my skin, and I even caught myself wondering if my ex would want me back, but then remembered he dumped me for being ugly, so I was better off without his bum. 2 weeks later, my skin was almost entirely clear, with barely any pimples and a healthy glow again after it finally stopped peeling like an onion. The blackheads had vanished, and for the first time since being exposed to hard water, I felt genuinely beautiful. Even my roommate experienced a similar transformation from using the Q-Refi filter. She came out of the bathroom one day, screaming with joy that her acne was finally gone. Her skin was smooth for the first time, and she looked like she just got the best day of her life. She said no product she had ever used had cleared her skin, and I had a feeling she wasn't lying about that. Unlike me, she hadn't bothered with face towels or pillowcases, proving that the soft water from the Q-Refi filter alone was the key to fixing our skin. After seeing our skin, The sorority girls asked us how we had cleared our skin because they were tired of dealing with pimples all the time. We told them about the hard water in our college, and they were disgusted that they had been washing their faces with poop-colored water all this time, so we let them, along with other girls in our hall, use our sink with the Q-Refi filter. To say we've become popular over this is an understatement. My roommate's life changed instantly after she got hot. She went from being invisible to being the center of attention, and people were genuinely interested in whatever she had to say. Even guys who avoided her like the plague were now asking for her number. She was even invited to a party for the first time, even though it was at a furry convention. She even asked me to come along to show off how hot I was. Our confidence soared too, the point we didn't even care about seeing those furries. From then on we dressed up more often, experimented with new hairstyles, and enjoyed the compliments that came our way. We even became closer and we bonded over our new social status and went everywhere together. I love that I found a best friend through all this chaos, because I wasn't sure how I was going to survive in America. And it's a good thing I found the Q-Refi filter when I did, because I was about to increase the Japan sewer slide rates.
The Bank's Man. This is an old family story told as a story. I heard it directly from my mom. In the 1930s, during the Depression in America, a lot of farms were lost to bankruptcy and bank forfeiture. Very often the bank would hire a local man who knew the local farmers and growers, and who would cooperate with the bank and sheriff in getting these farms and houses repossessed by the bank. Certain members of my family owned a small orange orchard in California's Central Valley that was holding its own, barely. Part of running an orange orchard at that time was a practice called smudging, where during a cold snap you could save the crop by burning oil in the smudge pots all over the orchard and keep the worst of the heat away. Smudging required the use of fuel oil to burn, and if you couldn't get the fuel oil to keep the crop alive and unfrozen, you'd lose more than half the value in a single night of freezing temperatures. So, growers would cooperate to buy into a fuel oil truck and share some of the operating costs. These trucks would go from farm to farm dispensing oil, and each grower would buy enough oil to put back into the trucks the amount they used for their orchards. Now it turns out that the local bank's man in the area was a somewhat nearby neighbor of my family who also had his own small orchard. A certain relative of mine was a boy at that time, and he would earn extra money working for the bank's man in his orchard. The bank's man was a tyrant and a bully, who beat his wife and children, and who savagely beat my relative any time that the work done was not to his satisfaction. After yet another beating, the bank's man informed my relative that he was going to make certain that the smudge truck did not have enough oil for my family's orchard, and that when the crop was ruined, he'd make sure that the bank got the orchard. Times were very different then. My relative did not complain to his parents or tell them about the problem he was having with the bank's man. He only talked to his friends about the situation. So, a few families in the area were aware of the bank man's plot. One of the jobs that the man insisted on was my relative crawling down in the hatch of the fuel oil truck and dragging a small pump hose inside so that the man could manually pump out the very last dregs of the oil at the bottom. This was also considered unfair by the other growers because the next farmer in line always got a little less oil than he should have and had to pay to make up the difference. No one said anything because everyone was afraid of the man's tyranny and temper. My relative decided that he'd had enough and he was going to quit work for the man and try to find other work for the growing season. So, he told the man that he'd be quitting, and perhaps unwisely, he also told the man that he knew that the man was the one making the oil count come up short each week. The man beat my relative unconscious as retribution. But, he chose a bad time to do it. Since my relative was unconscious laying out in the orchard, the man had to be the one to climb down into the bottom of the oil truck to set the pump hose in place. My relative wasn't actually unconscious. He was laying on the ground, faking. When he saw the man climb down inside, he climbed up to the hatch and apologized to the man for making him mad and offered to help. But when the last of the fuel oil was pumped up, my relative pulled up the pump and then locked and closed the hatch, trapping the man inside. After about half an hour, the fumes inside made the man pass out. My relative went home, and one of his friends arrived to pick up the truck. The friend drove the truck to the oil depot and filled it up. Then he drove it to the next farm in the rotation. The bank's man was missing for several days before anyone took serious notice, and eventually his body was found in the tank. It was almost immediately ruled an accident, and no investigation was ever opened. His body was so saturated with oil and fumes that they had to bury him in a closed casket. The local funeral home in Strathmore refused to take him, so the funeral had to be held in Fresno instead, a long ways away. Almost no one attended. But, the sons of several local farmers and growers spent a lot of time providing free labor both to the widow and to my relative's parents all year that year. My relative's parents almost certainly knew what had happened to the man, but they did never talk about it. My racist kids ruined my wife and now she wants to replace them. My wife wants a baby but I'm afraid she will stop loving the kids we have now. When I was 15 I went to my first party and I ended up losing my V card. I later found out she was pregnant. She wanted to baby garbage it, but when my parents found out they were against the baby garbage and ended up convincing her to keep the pregnancy and we would pay her for it, and when babies would be born she could sign away her parental rights and we'd never bother her. Which is what happened. She gave birth to my twin boys that I love dearly. We were pretty well off so I had a nanny and it never slowed down my education. In college I, 22, met my now wife Hannah, 20. I instantly fell in love with her. She was beautiful, very smart and oddly skilled with knives. She was very caring and sometimes into our relationship I told her I had kids and she was fine with it. Later in our relationship she met the boys and they fell in love with each other quickly. We later got married at 25 and 23 and she moved in. The boys loved and cared for her. They would give her lots of kisses and hugs and truly I was so happy to see my three favorite people get along. I'm a pale man with white hair and my boys favored that while my wife is a dark-skinned woman. Once, my wife dropped off the boys and kissed them, and their classmates picked on them for having a black mom, and to retaliate they said she was their nanny. We talked about it and my wife chose to never accompany them to school again. My wife has this trip that she has always wanted to go on with her kids and has dreamed of it since she was a kid and went with her parents. She told me about it and we went together to go visit the place. First, she hasn't seen it in a long time and wanted to make sure it looked same as she remembered, and two, to don't trust her anymore since the last time she suggested a place she used to love. We ended up in dance club for disabled people. She was even more excited to take the boys and she made matching clothes for them and the boys helped her. 5 months ago I celebrated my 7-year wedding anniversary with my wife and posted it. It was great until one of my kids' classmates found it and showed other people, and my boys started getting picked on for having a black mom, and especially one so dark. They were lashing out at my wife and saying very racist and disrespectful things to her. 2 months later I got a call from a woman who claimed to be the mother of my children, and surely enough it was true. We'll call her Beth. She came back saying she wanted to check up on the boys and see how they were doing. I talked to my wife about this and she figured it would be good for the boys to meet their biological mom. They met and a month later my wife's trip was approaching. The boys suggested that Beth come along, but there were only 4 tickets and this trip had been planned out and booked 3 years prior, and it would be difficult to accommodate a 5th person since for most of the events, tickets were sold out. My older son suggested Beth comes instead of my wife since it's a family trip. My wife started to beg and plead with them that they had been planning this trip for a long time and it was their trip. I told the boys that Beth would not be going on this trip. I went on a business trip for 2 the next day, and while I was away, there was a party the boys asked to go to that I specifically said no to and instructed my wife to not let them go either. The boys tried to go when my wife reminded them of what I said, and they told her she wasn't their mother and to stop acting like it. I repeated that it was order and she couldn't let them go. The boys blamed her for their bio mom not being able to go on the trip, and long story short, one of my boys slapped her. I came home Saturday morning as I always do because everyone is home and they all wake up early to come greet me, and my wife would usually be making something delicious with loud music playing, and my boys would be arguing over something and they would always run to hug me. When I came, the house was quiet. No one was downstairs. I went to check on the boys and they were in a bad mood, and I went to find my wife and she was in bed just laying there. I later found out what happened and scolded the boys and canceled the trip. They begged and pleaded with me and apologized to my wife. She said there was no need to cancel the trip since I spent so much money on it. So I suggested she goes with Beth and the boys. She pointed out some safety concerns since we don't really know Beth as well and she's not exactly strong, so she forced me to go. While on the trip I called her a lot, but she preferred to text. A week later we got back and noticed the plants were dry, even though my wife prides herself in her garden. The inside looked exactly as it was when we left. I checked our house alarm system and noticed the door hadn't been opened since it closed when we left. I found my wife laying in her sewing room with all of my alcohols, even though she had never drunk any before, and I also noticed all of the clothes she made for the trip had been cut apart. She continued not to speak or move for the next 2 days, so I had to bathe her, but she wouldn't take any food. After some time she started to eat and hold me back when I would hug her, and we finally talked. I apologized for everything that had happened and she accepted my apology and forgave the boys. I noticed the 2 days that followed that she didn't really speak to the boys like she used to. She hasn't hugged them, kissed them, or made any cute comments about how much she loved them. A Friday also passed and she usually does game nights, but she hasn't. I confronted her and she told me she wasn't their mother, and her job was to make sure they were taken care of and she wasn't hurting them in any way. It has been like that since. The house is quiet, our relationship is back to normal, and she's affectionate towards me and everything, but she's not like that with the kids. A backstory about my wife: she has always wanted kids. She wanted only 2 kids to be specific because she didn't want to drive a minivan. Before we got married we talked about the kids and she told me she didn't want any since she now has 2 boys. I asked twice after that because I make enough and we have a 6-bedroom house, so it wouldn't be a problem. But she gave me the same answer, telling me she already has 2 kids. Today she told me wanted a baby. I feel if I do agree she will completely let go of the kids we have now. How should I go about this? Has anyone else who's remarried had an issue with their kids not getting along with a new partner? My best friend removed me from her wedding party because I lost weight and she felt insecure. My best friend is getting married soon. When she first announced it, I was in the process of trying to lose weight. I was somewhere around 93 kilograms when she last saw me, and now I'm 61. She was unaware I had lost so much weight due to minimal contact, but she asked me to be her bridesmaid and I accepted. When she saw me, she didn't seem too happy. Something was off as she barely even hugged me. She didn't say anything then, so I just assumed I was reading into it. When we were getting lunch at a restaurant, she noticed I only got brown rice and a salad, and she commented on how I'd changed so much. I only laughed and told her that I was on a diet until I lost some more weight. This led to a rant from her side about how now she feels like the fat one of the 2. We have been friends since high school, and she's had this thing where she'd treat me like I was a guy. I am 5 feet 7 inches and she's barely 5 feet tall. Because of this height difference, I've always looked heavy next to her, and she took pleasure in that. She used to wear my clothes and comment on how my t-shirt is a one-piece for her. How my hands are so much bigger than hers. And some days, how I look like her mother because of how tall and fat I was. This always made me feel less feminine somehow, and kind of ugly. However, now that I'd lost weight, I didn't look fat anymore and she couldn't do any of those cutesy things, and that really hurt her. I attempted to change the topic, but she kept circling back to that, and then asked me if I'd lost weight deliberately for her wedding. I told her that I'd been trying to lose weight for a while before that, but her wedding was a good motivator for me. I wanted to look good at my best friend's wedding, and feel more confident in a bridesmaid dress. Then, she flat out accused me of trying to steal her thunder. She said that whenever I'd said I was going to try to lose weight, I'd Relapsed back to old habits pretty quick, so she didn't think I was serious. She told me that I was trying to make her look like the ugly best friend and trying to steal her spotlight on the most important day of her life. She then proceeded to tell me at one point that she was still prettier and daintier than me, and no matter how thin I got, she'd always be thinner. She added that because of this betrayal she no longer felt comfortable having me as a bridesmaid, and I could attend as a guest instead. That strung a nerve, and I promptly left the restaurant, and texted her that I was not interested in attending her wedding. Been getting a lot of messages on her part and her mom about how I'm stressing her out and attempting to guilt trip her. Tired and done with her poop already. Some things she's done to me over the years: 1. Sending me memes about how every tiny girl needs a huge girl to protect her. 2. Post pictures of us where she looked great, but I didn't even though we had so many where we both looked good. 3. Whine about how she's trying to put on weight right after I tried talking about how I was trying to lose some weight. 4. Fat jokes. 5. Flirting with guys I liked. She'd talk trash about them right until I thought they were cute, then she would flirt with them. 6. I'm not like other girls. 7. Call herself fat when I comment on my own body. 8. She used to comment really mean things on my posts. I posted a picture of me in a pretty dress at an event, and she said I bet that dress would look better on me. All her comments were meant to be jokes and she never stopped saying those things, even when I said they weren't funny and wanted her to stop. 9. Coming to my house for a sleepover, and then ditching me in the middle of the night to go hang out with someone else, only to come back to sleep. 10. All her girlfriends are jealous of her. She used to come to me and rant about how literally every girl in her life is jealous of her because boys give her more attention. Made me wonder if she spoke about me the same way to others.
What would you do if your child or teenager threw a birthday party, and nobody showed up? This didn't happen to my son, but to my younger brother. On his 6th birthday, I was 17. So, my mom handed out every invitation and some parents actually responded and made sure they were going. The day came and nobody showed up. My mom was furious and my brother was so sad. My mom was busy calling the parents, but I didn't care about them. To be honest, I just wanted to cheer up my brother. So, I called some of my closest friends, and I told them, "It's my brother's birthday party, come on over, there's plenty of food." In an hour they were there, and we had a blast. We jumped in the bouncy house, and I taught my brother how to play FIFA. He opened his presents, and my friends actually got him something on their way. We sang happy birthday and he started crying and hugged me and we blew the candles together. He forgot all about the people that didn't show up and he slept like a baby.
Adult entertainment workers, what's the most wholesome client experience you've had while on the job? I work as a cam girl. There are a lot of sad stories, dead wives, divorcees, etc., but the one that hit me was this guy. We'll call him Steve. Steve sends me a message during one of my public shows asking to go private. I go private with him after the show and he just wants to talk about my life. No nudity or anything, and in private, his cam isn't visible to me. So I sit there talking about my life for about 2 hours at $5/minute and he doesn't say a word. I finally run out of things to say and he is just like, "Thanks. Can I buy your Snapchat?" Of course, I say yes. I give him my Snapchat, and he signs off. The next week, I get a Snapchat from Steve asking if we can be private again. I say sure. We do the same thing. He just wants me to talk about my day and random life stories for 2 hours. We do this once a week for about a month before he asks for Skype, where I can see him. I agree. I still know nothing about this person. It's our scheduled time to Skype and he doesn't pick up the call. I snap him to make sure everything is okay and he says he's changed his mind. He wants to do our usual thing where I can't see him. I say okay. This time, though, he types to me and I respond. He gives me his life story. He tells me that he is an independent software developer, won't say which for privacy reasons, in Switzerland. He's never had a girlfriend and is a virgin. He's 36 years old. He has crippling social anxiety and says he hasn't spoken to a woman face to face, not even via webcam, since he graduated from college. He says that he's hideously ugly and felt overwhelming guilt for even looking at a woman because he felt that it was just unwanted and offensive to her. I tried to just listen and be understanding. At the end of the conversation, he asked if he could turn on his cam and try to have a conversation with me. I agreed. He turns on his cam, and he's an average-looking guy. A bit overweight, but a handsome face and a nice haircut, clean-looking. I was shocked and just sad that he thought so lowly of himself. I told him that he was very handsome and that he shouldn't think so lowly of himself, and we just chatted about life for a few more hours that night before saying goodbye. The next day, I got a Snapchat from Steve. He says that he felt so good about himself that he finally said hi to the front desk receptionist at work. And she said hi back and smiled. He was thrilled about this normal social interaction. We didn't video chat again, but he snapped at me every time he interacted with somebody. Last I heard, he has a girlfriend. Am I the asshole for demanding my husband to pay me the $1,000 he spent behind my back? My husband 33 and I, 31, used to have a 2-income home, but in 2020 we've lost our home and one of our incomes, his. We moved into a smaller apartment, had to sell many things and give up most of our costly habits. My husband has an expensive habit of going to the spa for a weekly massage session. We live in an urban area so this stuff is ridiculously expensive. A single session is $250, and he has to have it every week so that it'd be nearly $1,000 a month. I offered him to have his session at a regular spa, but no, he has to get it from that luxurious spa near the restaurant we used to go, saying the lady who gives the massage is an expert and he's used to her. Problem is I'm the only income earner and I'm struggling to make ends meet. I'm also pregnant and need to save money to prepare a nursery. I told him to cut his sessions, but he refused. I told him I won't be paying for them anymore and he said he'd get the money himself. Yesterday I checked and saw that he's been using my credit card for his sessions for a whole month and had maxed out completely. I found that out when I went shopping for baby essentials and the cashier said I had no money. I had to return everything, then went home and went off on him. I told him he maxed my card out and made me look like an idiot at the store. He said he didn't tell me cause he knew I'd have an issue with it. I demanded he pay back the $1,000 he spent, but he refused. I yelled at him, calling him irresponsible, and he got upset and called me selfish and told me to stop playing victim and that this is affecting both of us since he's going to be a parent too and it's stressful for him and I keep dismissing his own needs as a human. I went upstairs and he went out. He started giving me the silent treatment, but I kept demanding the money back. He said I shouldn't expect it back since we're married, then my money is technically his and I should stop using his unemployment against him. It's gotten to the point where I don't know what to think. So am I the asshole?
My sister said that women should not rely on a man's money and called me a gold digger for marrying a wealthy man. Now, she's jealous of the life I have. I have a sister, Sarah. She has always studied well and is our parents' pride and joy. She got into an excellent university's engineering program on a full scholarship and had a terrific job offer upon graduation. We were all proud of her. In comparison, I was a mediocre student. I got into a less prestigious university studying something Sarah said to our parents won't get me a good job, but my parents helped me pay my tuition. Nevertheless, I had to work to spend money and other expenses. Through work, I met my now husband. He is from a family of generational wealth with their own business. We married when I graduated, and my sister said she was very disappointed in me for being a gold digger and that women should not rely on a man's money to get ahead. Sarah left the company at 30 to start her own business with her now husband. The business was doing well until the pandemic. They struggled but managed to keep the business together until this year. Sarah confessed to her parents that she needed a lot of money to keep her business afloat. My parents suggested she borrow from me. Now, I do have the amount of cash Sarah needs. My husband heads his family company and gives me monthly spending money and a credit card he takes care of. I don't work because my days are spent looking after our 2 sons and keeping his mom company a few days a week. She's a lovely lady who's still very active and enjoys taking me places. Every time we go out, she pays the bills, so I have a lot of money saved. Sarah and her husband approached me in private a few days ago. They asked to borrow money from me, with a detailed plan of paying me back, though with much lower interest than from a bank and a contract. I wrote them a check, and as I handed it to her, I looked her in the eyes and asked, "You realize you're borrowing my gold-digging money, right?" Sarah had a red face before immediately getting up and walking away. Her husband looked awkward but finally took the check, mumbled thanks, and left. Later, my mom called me and said I was cruel to Sarah during her hard time, that there was no need to humiliate my sister like that. I told my mom she never said anything when Sarah called me a gold digger, so she had no say.
Substance addicts of Reddit, what is your daily routine? My thing was speed. Seeing as my particular substance of choice takes 3 normal days and makes them one hellish one, I'll go over my routine during the course of a several-day-long span. I'd wake up extremely groggily and slowly, feeling like I was walking through molasses trying to go anywhere, so I'd stay in bed until the time I needed to get up, then take 60 to 90 milligrams of Adderall along with a cup or 2 of coffee. I'm a physics major, so I'd usually have a problem set or 2 to do. Once the Adderall kicked in, I'd sit in the science center and work for hours, up to 12 straight, in the same position without moving, except for the frequent bathroom breaks, after which I'd sit back down and resume my proofs, etc. If I had to go to class or work or something, I'd go, but would keep consuming a steady supply of coffee, Red Bull, and tons of water throughout the duration of whatever I was doing. Every 4 hours or so I'd do another 30 to 60 milligrams of Adderall, depending on how much I had allotted for that particular binge marathon. I wouldn't eat the entire time, and my skin would constantly feel hot to the touch. My heart would race, palpitations were frequent, my hands would shake, and I would be extremely jittery. I would just be your typical idea of a speeded up person. And I loved it. Towards the end of the second day I'd simultaneously be fully awake and very fatigued, which is a singularly miserable state in which to find oneself. My body and mind would work slower and slower but would never be able to stop for rest, because the addy, like a slave driver, would make them power through. At this point it was no longer enjoyable because no matter how much I took, the kind of euphoria I loved from the beginning would refuse to make an appearance now. So then I'd wait for my body to get this devil drug out of my system, for my running mind to slow down, for my heart to stop racing, albeit all just enough for the diphenhydramine to overtake it all and let me rest. If I happened to fall asleep with still some amphetamine in my system it would, needless to say, be a very unrestful sleep. I'd wake up every few hours to drink more water, but once the long sleep came, it'd last a good 24 hours. This meant that I'd miss everything that happened, all classes, social events, meetings that I'd scheduled. If I was particularly on top of my schedule that week, I'd have made sure to cancel/flake on everything during the big sleep before it actually came. Then, after my hibernation, the whole process would begin again. While I was using, I was extremely unreliable, my behavior was erratic, and I was generally an unpredictably volatile being. Adderall was my best friend in the world, and I often call my separation from it the emotionally worst breakup of my life. It sounds crazy, but I loved everything I thought it gave me because it allowed me to shed all the human trappings of existence, hunger, tiredness, and everything mundane. But eventually I crashed and burned, landing myself in a psychiatric hospital being held against my will. Now I'm 71 days clean and absolutely loving it. The chaos is gone, and everything has been normalized once more. What is a great, really passive-aggressive baby shower gift? When I was first married, our living room was blue. Mother-in-law gave me brown decor. I said nothing and let it go. A couple years later we moved and our living room was brown. Mother-in-law gave us blue decor. Again I ignored it. Mind you, when she gave either gift she would say, I know the living room is brown but I love this, tacky, low-quality gift, so I couldn't resist. We were expecting our first child. Mother-in-law asked how we were decorating the nursery. I said Mickey Mouse but all Disney characters. She said great choice, there are so many things currently with that theme. But, why Mickey Mouse? I said he's cute and happy. Sister-in-law commented a friend had decorated her nursery in Raggedy Ann and Andy. I said it's a sad memory for me as my cousin's 2 babies died in their nursery because of a house fire a few years before. Their nursery was all Raggedy Ann and Andy. I didn't think I could walk in every day and see that. Mother-in-law was there listening. She asked the particulars about the fire. A week later mother-in-law came over with decorations. She is so happy and excited. It was Raggedy Ann and Andy. She said, I know you said Mickey but I love this stuff, so reconsider your theme. It's been a couple years, so put it behind you and use these. After all, I'm this baby's grandma and should have some clout in these decisions. Then she gets pouty that the room is already painted and decorated. She told me to put up the pictures anyway. There is no way I would ever want to see that every day. In my hormonal condition, the last thing I needed was dealing with that. Please don't be that person. It's supposed to be a happy time with happy memories. We have no happy memories of mother-in-law. But my husband let her know it upset me and that the decor was not changing. Of course the usual pout and pity started. She was ignored. We moved again and the living room was blue. Of course first thing she asked was what color is the living room. She came over a short time later and handed my husband a housewarming gift. She said she didn't want to upset me because I get so emotional about her decorating tastes being so different. LOL, it was green. She apologized for getting it wrong again. I laughed in front of her and said maybe our daughter could teach her some things. I always hoped she'd grow up, but she died at 76 before ever maturing. Don't be that guy. I broke up with my girlfriend mid-climax. We had been together for just over 3 years, and I thought we had a healthy relationship. We were close, honest with each other, and enjoyed each other's company. While I was aware that my girlfriend had always been a bit secretive, I never saw it as a cause for concern. That is, until one fateful day. It all began with a suspicious text message that caught my eye. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I took a peek at her phone. What I found was shocking and heartbreaking, clear evidence that she had been cheating. What hurt me even more was that she had been incredibly open with someone else about her personal preferences in the bedroom, describing things that she never shared with me. She had even gone as far as to say that I wouldn't be able to fulfill her desires because I wasn't into certain interests, which I won't detail here. I was baffled by this, considering that I am not vanilla by any means and I'm more than happy to try new things, so I am stumped as to why she didn't bring this up with me and instead resorted to cheating. I spent the next few days torn and conflicted about what to do. Anger, sadness, and confusion overwhelmed me, and I finally settled on a plan that I now recognize may have been quite childish. After having a few drinks for confidence, I decided to talk to her in a way that was out of the ordinary. We started getting intimate and I intentionally began to do the very thing she described in those private messages. She was surprised, certainly, but in a positive way. She was enjoying herself more than usual, and I found myself torn as I watched her express her happiness so openly. A part of me almost backed out of my plan, but the wound was too fresh, and I pressed on. I led her on for a while, drawing out the moment, and making her plead for release. And then, at the very height of her joy, I leaned in and told her what I had discovered. In that moment, with words that were as cold as they were decisive, I ended our relationship. You want to use my truck wash on your car? I do not feel sorry for what is about to happen here. Concrete mixers are big, ungainly things. Trying to maneuver them around a crowded job site is like trying to play miniature golf with a tennis ball. The biggest problem is, of course, other people, specifically other people's cars. Nobody is going to lug 50 pounds of tools any further than they have to, so if there is an open space near where they want to be, they park there, never mind that it is right next to a sidewalk or directly across from a driveway that a crew is obviously prepping. It only makes things worse when it's done by people who should know better, and done intentionally. So, we're pumping a grout walls in the late afternoon, which already has me in a bit of a mood. Grout jobs tend to be very slow. Each cinder block has 2 cells, and the crew pumps the grout into those cells, filling them all the way to the top of the wall. Grout is really just a term for a weak concrete mix that is pumped super wet. It has to be that wet to make it all the way to the bottom of the wall, otherwise it sticks to the sides of the cinder blocks, or gets caught up on steel reinforcement. There is a lot of stopping and starting, as well as a lot of moving the pump. It all takes time, during which that concrete starts to go off and stiffen up. Things only get worse on a hot day, and the subs will do anything to get more water in the load. Heroin addicts looking for a fix have nothing on grout pumpers eyeballing your last 20 gallons. As we move to a new street, we find a line of cars parked all along the side of the street we are working on, just far enough apart to take up as much space as possible without leaving enough room to get the pump in there. Turns out it is another concrete crew setting up to do patios. No problem, we're all concrete guys here, and they know how it is. We ask them to move. That I am writing this post tells you what their response was. It turns out they are waiting for their own pump and mixer to show up, and they intentionally block the street because they don't want us to be in their way. Their crew chief tells us we can wait for them to finish and move on, or we can just work around them. It's pretty obvious he expects us to wait. Waiting is, of course, going to make the concrete go off even more and will rack up standby charges for the customer, but trying to work around their cars is going to mean blocking the street and rolling up the hose every time we move. Normally the crew just drags or carries it down the sidewalk, but we can't do that with the cars in the way. It would take much longer, depending on when their pump shows up, it might not even save us any time. Still, Todd the pumper rolls his pump right up next to the lead car and feeds his hose out around it. At the best of times, a concrete pump farts and sputters like a nervous chihuahua, flinging small globs of concrete out the hopper. If the driver isn't paying attention and accidentally lets the concrete level get too low, the pump sucks in air. Feeding a concrete pump air is like feeding a hippopotamus olestra. Shit's not pretty, and it gets everywhere. We probably end up moving that pump twice as many times as we have to, but it ensures that every single one of those cars gets to spend some quality time next to the hopper. We finish or done with the job and are washing out the pump when the crew chief, whose own concrete and pump still haven't shown up yet, storms over to complain about all the concrete splatter on their cars. I point out that we told them we'd be pumping there and asked them to move, but they refused. At this point, he sees that I have a truck wash bucket strapped to my water tank and demands I let him use it to clean off his car. I tell him that is a terrible idea, smoking lounge on the Hindenburg levels of terrible. The stuff we use is designed to dissolve dried concrete, and it will probably damage his car. The concrete is fresh enough that he can probably just rinse it off with water. He isn't having it. He tells me to stop lying. If it doesn't damage my truck, it won't hurt his car. Besides, he's done this before and knows what he is doing. Now, keeping a concrete mixer clean is a downright Sisyphean task. No matter how hard you try, chutes overflow, pumps splatter, and plants huff cement powder all over your truck. There are a variety of chemicals used to clean off the concrete, and most of the modern mixes are relatively safe, for something that can dissolve concrete. Our plants provide a phosphoric acid mix. Relatively safe isn't the same as actually safe, to any drivers that need it, so it is quite common for there to be a bucket of it stashed somewhere on the truck. Of course, part of what makes these chemicals safer also makes them somewhat less effective. That's why some of us will bring in our own cleaning products to fortify the company mix. These are not the friendly chemicals that will just leave you with a mild chemical burn. My bucket of fun dips down to the good old days of leaded gasoline, asbestos, and red dye number 2. Still, I warned him, and he assured me he knew what he was doing. Besides, he's intentionally being a jackass and expected my sub to pay standby for his convenience. I let him have the bucket. I half expect him to stop when he pulls the lid off. The witch's brew in the bucket smells like Walter White's bathtub. Somehow, the fact that his nose hairs are curling up like a spider in a flame doesn't seem to faze him. The brush goes in the bucket. The brush comes out of the bucket. Brush slams onto the hood of the car with a wet slap. I can only watch in mute horror as the man proceeds to not just clear off the concrete, but bathe his entire hood in hydrochloric acid, rubbing it in to get out all those nasty water spots. It's like watching an orphan unwittingly skin his favorite puppy. None of us stick around long enough to see the final result, but it is already apparent that he has scrubbed off the clear coat and is in the process of etching brush marks in the paint. I don't want to be anywhere near him when that hood dries out. I let him keep the bucket. What keeps you awake at night? Title: The Demons Inside My Mind, A Tale of Love, Secrets, and Truth. Hey, readers, grab a seat, because I've got a story that'll keep you up at night. See, there's this thing that's been haunting my thoughts lately, and it's become my personal hell. Let me paint the picture for you. It all began a few months ago, when I met this girl. She was like a substance, intoxicatingly beautiful with a wild side that intrigued me. I won't bore you with the details of how we got together, because that's not what keeps me awake at night. No, what plagues my restless mind are the dark secrets hidden beneath the surface of that seemingly perfect relationship. You see, my girlfriend, let's call her Lisa, had a side that she never revealed until it was too late. At first, it was subtle signs that something was off: late-night phone calls, secretive texts, and her constant need for privacy. But being a dumbass blindly smitten by love, I brushed it all aside. I thought love would conquer all, you know? How naive I was. As nights turned to weeks, her actions grew more erratic. She'd disappear for days without a word or explanation. My phone would be filled with desperate messages, begging her to come back. But she'd always return with that sweet smile, like nothing happened. One evening, while she was out again, I decided to play detective. I scoured her belongings, searching for any evidence of what the hell was going on. And boy, did I find it. Hidden beneath some old love letters was a stack of passports, fake IDs, and stacks of cash. My mind went into a frantic frenzy. Who was she? What the hell had I gotten myself into? Panic set in, and the realization struck me: Lisa was involved in some serious poop, and by being with her, I had become entangled in her web of darkness. Every night since then has been a living nightmare. The sound of footsteps outside my apartment feels like the approach of certain death. Paranoia has become my closest companion. Was that car following me? Are those whispered conversations about me? The demons inside my mind won't let me rest, won't let me find peace. But here's where the story takes a wild turn. Just as I was contemplating leaving Lisa and escaping this insane reality, she disappeared, vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. I'm torn between relief and dread. Was it her enemies catching up with her? Or did she just choose a new city to terrorize? I've spent countless nights searching for her, only to come up empty. I've scoured every corner of the city, asked every shady character I could find, but it's like she's vanished off the face of the earth. I'm starting to lose hope, but I can't give up. I know in my heart that the truth is out there, and I'm determined to find it. As I sit here, lost in the dark depths of my haunted mind, I can't help but wonder, what if I can't find her? What if she's gone forever? What if I never get the closure I need? Only time will tell, my friends. Only time will tell. So there you have it, a truth that keeps me awake every night. The demons in my mind won't let me forget, won't let me move on. And until I find the closure I need, I remain trapped, ensnared in this twisted tale of love, secrets, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Stay tuned, my fellow night owls. The story's not over yet. It's just beginning. I'm still searching for the answers, and I won't stop until I find them. Until then, I'll keep my eyes open and my heart guarded. Who knows what I'll uncover next? Am I the a-hole for refusing to help my needy daughter move? I have been married to my wife for 29 years. We recently moved our 19-year-old daughter into her college apartment. My wife had already helped move in the day before, and we had to help finish up the process. Upon arrival, we moved the boxes into her apartment. After we took all of her things in, I figured we were done. My wife informed me that she was going to help our daughter unpack and get settled in. I asked how long it would take, and she told me about an hour. I waited in the living room as my wife and daughter unpacked. After an hour, I went in to see how much longer they would be, and my wife was busy helping our daughter decorate. I politely said that our daughter didn't need help with decorating and that she had plenty of time to decorate the next day before classes started. My wife told me that she was going to help, and that since we didn't have any other plans, time shouldn't matter. My wife does a lot for our kids, and I think that because they are young adults they can do things for themselves. This is one of those cases. I refused to get involved and stood outside while they worked. When it was time to leave, we drove our daughter to the music building because she had an audition for a vocal ensemble. My wife got teary-eyed and gave her a hug goodbye. I got out of the car and told my daughter that I didn't mean to offend her, but what if something happened to either of her parents? What would she do? She needed to stop being so needy. My daughter got mad and said I ruined everything. My wife yelled at me and said that she wished I hadn't even come, so I just walked away. Finally, I got in the car and we drove home in silence.